Caballo dropped 83 points? No way. No way. Wait, ESPN is saying it. What? What the? Yo. Is this real? Is there like a highlight reel we can watch, or I'll get struck for that, won't I? Yeah, well. God. I'm just gonna type 83 on Twitter. No way. That's crazy. Oh my God. Yo.
The second highest scoring game in
Kobe's looking down from above. Look at Spoelstra.
Against the New York Knicks when he was playing for Philadelphia.
Yo. He did it. Wow. It was so unserious. Oh, they were just looking for stats, huh? We're so back. I love that meme of Kim Jong-un. You know the one? It's like something about after all the it's over, we finally had fuck. Look at the meme. I'm gonna Google it. It's so over meme. Kim Jong-un. Oh, here it is. In the midst of it's so over, I found that there was within me an invincible we're so back. Yo, what up, Jen? How you doing? Weird comment. It forced the white pill deep inside me. Yo, what up, folks? Gotta respect it. Yo, what up, Timmy? Timothy. What up, everybody? Hope you guys are doing well. Happy Tuesday. Did everyone have a good day? You're the reason I whistled this song in the underground parking lot to undo my resting bitch face. I need you to know I appreciate this about you. I appreciate you. I appreciate all you guys. You guys are some of the bestest, most goodest people there are. Everyone surrendering today? Did you all surrender? Did you offer your hands of defeat? Let me start. First of all, guys, we're like staring upon our wine collection. All right, we are just absolutely spoiled for riches here in our catalog of Josiah videos today to start the day with. I know. I really listen. I'll talk a little bit about that in the Dem Angst portion of our discussion today. Share some Latin wisdom to help smooth over the relationships in my life. I don't know. I feel like the Latin part of I'm not good at the Latin part of the relationship structure in my life. Like there's a lot of, for like personal relationships, of like almost like negging that Latin people will often do, which in interpersonal settings, like I don't love. And do you guys know those memes when it's like the kid goes downstairs and all the family starts like roasting them? You know what I'm talking about? Like Bants, yeah. For whatever reason, like I find the banter culture sometimes, and now I try to do my best to cope, but like I find the banter culture sometimes a bit like and for whatever reason, it's not the same when it's like on stream or something. In like public interactions, there's like plenty of banter, right? But the banter culture aspect of like Latin stuff is can be off-putting to me. And yeah, I don't know. But in general, I think that one thing that I really appreciate about my upbringing was like stressing the family aspect of it. And I find that that's like I feel like not you don't always have to be perfect. I'm not always perfect at the family aspect of it, but there is like a center core of like respect to family that when I go to reach for it, it's there, right? And I don't know. This is like not, I'm sure, addressing anything of what you're talking about, but there is like I don't know how to describe it. I don't really know if that's not something that other family, from ethnic groups have. I'm sure some do as well, but people tell me there's like a familia thing that's not as appreciated. Like even in Latin American culture, in like Latin American society, there's a lot of people, like in America, you're just pushed out of the house when you're in college, right? And it's kind of like weird to go back or something, right? But like it's very normal in Latin American societies to like until you make a family of your own, to stay with like your parents and grandparents and stuff. And one of the big ways to provide for older peoples in these countries is through intergenerational care, like children taking care of their parents afterwards. It actually can start to be a problem in some of these societies because they don't have, as these societies almost progress and become more mature, the absence of certain like pension programs or full formal employment can leave big gaps if like children start to veer off of the path of like traditional taking care of abuelita, right? I'm just rambling. I feel like you're describing I'm not doing a good job of describing this, but it's expected to stay. Yeah, maybe that's right too. It's just like a very different, and it would be like seen as dishonorable to not provide in that, like here, where I think in America there's a lot more. And again, not true of everything. This is all an oversimplification. It's all just vibes that I'm talking about right now. So people can debunk me with stats, I'm sure. It's just my vibe. I feel like sometimes there's this like this huge desire not to be a bum or to be a mooch or anything like that, right? I remember watching the Trump movie, The Apprentice. Good movie, by the way. I really liked it. Thought it was really excellent. I think about it a lot sometimes. But there's that moment where Freddie Jr. tries to approach Trump, right? When he's going through bad stuff. In that interaction between Trump and Fred Jr., always oh wow, that seems like not a very Latin way to greet people. Sorry, I'm just totally rambling. Totally rambling. All right, we're staring at our cornucopia of Josiah videos. Amongst our riches, which one shall we dine from today? I say you guys decide. Oh wait, 604,000 views. All right, I think we have a winner here, right? Our boy Josiah.
Immediately following his disastrous speech,
this is like 500,000. This dude is on fire. Yo, Pisco asked Kyle, and he said he supported and voted for Kamala. You, Hutch and Josiah didn't seem to think he didn't or were unsure. No, I was fairly sure he voted for Kamala. I think we're unsure if he endorsed publicly, if he publicly signaled. I'm fairly sure Hassan probably voted for Kamala. In fact, I'm quite sure that he probably did. So the conversation, I think, is not about what you personally did, but whether or not he endorsed or publicly signaled enough that he would. I think that's what people are. And my impression was that he did so in more ways than Crystal did. That was my impression, but I can't prove it right now. Well, did he endorse? Maybe you're addressing that person, maybe. Yeah. I just think we're talking about something different. And I think the discourse is more about, I know people will say, did you vote for her? But I almost feel like that's like a proxy for when it comes to streamers and influencers. Did you publicly acknowledge who you were going to vote for or clearly signal that, right? Yeah, no, I was going to react to this. Wait, I have a video. We might go there. We might preempt Josiah and just go there right away. Yeah, why don't we just do that? Let's preempt it. Yeah, so big election news, guys. I found this out by watching IRI. Shout out IRI. Great channel. I'm Really Important, my co-host on Lib and Learn. He does awesome C-SPAN election streams. Great, just basic politics. Really just good guy. But yeah, this is Steve Kornacki on the race in Georgia. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat. And I think a very, very positive result for Democrats. Now, keep in mind, there are multiple Republicans running in this race, and Georgia, like Texas, has a runoff system. But just look at, and I haven't seen this to be clear, but to me, the numbers look like a massive overperformance for Democrats. Well, he doesn't usually officially state endorsements. He just makes it clear who he wants to win on his coverage. I don't know if that's true because I think he endorsed for a time the Green Party candidate, right? And even if he doesn't usually endorse, I think that we would still critique that, the standing policy of not endorsing unless it's done for a really good reason. Maybe an independent journalist or something who really just doesn't take sides and is just straight facts or something. Maybe we would understand it for them or for some other, business who doesn't want to prejudice their business or something, right? So I think even if there's a standing policy, which I'm not sure if there is, I think that there would still be potential room for criticism. But I don't doubt that he probably did endorse. Oh, sorry, he probably did vote for Kamala. And I think his rhetoric has been very clear about the lesser of two evils, especially in recent months. I mean, I turn on any given Kyle video and it's saying the exact throat clears that I think are very appropriate. And so I really do think that he gets that aspect of it, But I hear your point that there are some people who have like standing policies of endorsements, but I don't think that immunizes them unless we like think there's a good reason for like the standing policy. So I don't know that there's like an easy way to get around the critique. Like I kind of roll my eyes when Sitch says it too. Like I just don't endorse because I just want to be seen as independent. I mean, maybe, but you're kind of like in the commentary / influencer, like you get involved in these political disputes and you give your opinions on them from the perspective of like what things ought to look like and what is good and what is bad. And it's not just this like other predominating interest that we would like respect when it comes to lack of endorsements, I think. But I understand your point, you know? No, I get it. I'm just trying to, I keep going on tangents. It's making me want to start with different things because I also see the breakdown in communication on the Hutch stuff too. And I think it's it's not the same thing as what we're talking about right here, but it feels like there's a similar mismatch. I actually do think oftentimes there's like a breakdown in communication, and I can understand both sides of it. And so today I will like talk a little bit about that and just trying to understand each side and present what I think is getting everyone upset. I'll try to do it without, putting too much of my spin on it, which I oftentimes I like to do. I do respect Kyle. I do. All right, let's just see the election news. This is the Marjorie Taylor Greene seat, and overperformance, I think.
NBC News chief data analyst Steve Kornacki over at the big board. Steve, this is a lot of build-up, a lot of computing, and then all of a sudden we have a result very, very quickly. Are you surprised at the numbers that we're seeing so far?
I think a little bit for two reasons, Gotti. Look, I mean...
So no, there are two Republicans. So if you put their numbers together, and it narrowed even more than this, I think. I think the last I checked, Harris was at 37 or 8 or something. So these narrowed a little bit more too. But even putting it together, in 2024, it was like 60, right? 60 plus. And they're not even breaking a majority here, the Republicans. So it's definitely, I think it's like a 17 or 16 point overperformance, but let's let Steve Kornacki talk about it.
Trump-endorsed candidate here. I think there was an expectation, certainly, he was the favorite among Republicans to be the top Republican vote getter. But I think the distance between Fuller and the other Republican candidates here, Colton Moore was sort of seen as the top rival to Fuller. It's not even close between the two of them. I mean, you could see here Fuller,
Fuller, I think, has Trump's endorsement.
Moore barely over 10% here district-wide. So I think the power of that Trump endorsement to really unify the Republicans around Clay Fuller. Again, Fuller had run for this seat a couple years ago. No Trump endorsement. He ran in a Republican primary. He got like 6-7% of the vote. Turns around now, gets the Trump endorsement. Look at the difference. I mean, it's the power of that Trump endorsement here. So I think that, and I think, again, looking here, Sean Harris, the distinct possibility, Sean Harris, a Democrat, finishes tonight with the most votes. He will be the prohibitive underdog in the runoff. This is a district Trump won by 37 points, but Harris really consolidating the Democratic vote. And there are some places in this district where, in particular, Harris has dramatically, and Democrats, I think, have dramatically overperformed. I think that's in line with a story we've been talking about here in this second Trump term, Gotti, where the Democratic base, Democratic voters, are very energized. And I would say that the results are still incomplete from this county up here, Whitfield County, where Dalton is. But this county is interesting because it has one of the highest shares of Hispanic voters of any county in Georgia. And currently, at least, Harris is overperforming. Harris, the Democrat, is overperforming more here than in any other county in this district relative to 2024. Again, there are still some results to come, but these numbers have been getting our attention from Whitfield County tonight.
Yeah, it's tough to know what's going on because, as you said, 2024, 37 points is, I mean, you could make some gains, but are you making 37 points worth of gains is the big question. And for those that aren't, into the weeds with the numbers, they're going to be tuning in and they're going to be like, wait a minute, Sean Harris, 39%, he's beating a Republican in Georgia. Oh my gosh, what's going on? Can you just explain like the craziness of the jungle primary for those that don't live in a jungle primary state here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a special election to Congress, so it's a little bit different here. But everybody, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, they all run on the same ballot. If nobody gets a majority, 50% plus one, top two advance. And so I think the easiest way to think about this is there were a couple of Democratic candidates who ran, but Harris is getting about 95% of the Democratic vote. Okay, so Democrats are outnumbered in this district in a big way. But Harris is getting almost all of the Democrats who voted in today's election. Meanwhile, Fuller, the Trump-backed candidate who's going to be the other candidate in this runoff Republican, he's getting the most Republican votes of any of these Republicans. He's getting about 60% of the Republican votes. There are a lot more Republicans. Fuller's only getting 60% of them tonight. There are fewer Democrats. Harris is getting almost all of them. So that could be enough for Harris to finish first. But if all those Republicans, not even all of them, but if just most of those Republicans unify around Fuller in the runoff, he's the clear favorite.
Yeah, definitely a gut check there. Although, so far, based on the numbers that you've seen, do you think that this is somewhat of a referendum on the president right now?
100%.
I think it's telling you two things, though, right? It's telling you that the Republican base still, that Trump endorsement, decisive in this race. I think clearly decisive. So among Republican voters in that Republican universe, that clout that Trump has, very much this result, I think, is very much telling you it's still very much a thing. But we're also seeing, this has been another story since Trump came back to the White House, energy among Democratic voters, interest in elections, participation in elections. We're seeing evidence here in these results, overwhelmingly Republican district. We're seeing Democratic energy there.
And this is just great. I want us to be able to acknowledge good results without going overboard and being like, we're definitely going to win. Don't ever underestimate your enemies. Ever. But this is really good news. The guy just said the Dems can perform and still lose. Yeah. Which is true. Because this is super red. More red than Texas is. This would be a crazier result than a Texas win for Tallarico. I know. People don't want to do ranked choice. It's just they don't trust the math. They don't trust the formulas. You got to make it real simple. Real simple. All right, let me think. Should I talk a little bit about... All right, I guess the Kyle thing gets me wanting to talk about the Dem Angst thing real quick. But should we do Josiah first? Let's do Josiah first. And we'll... Oh, wait, wrong thing.
Immediately following his disastrous speech in front of congressional Republicans, which we'll talk about tomorrow because yikes, Donald Trump conducted a Q&A about...
Oh, did he make this video yesterday before he came on?
...about his even more disastrous war in Iran. And just, even by Trump standards, folks, what you're about to see is truly bonkers. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Folks, I've got several clips to show you, but if you want us to skip right to the punchline, just to give you a snapshot in time into how this man's liquefying brain works, listen to this question and listen to how he responds.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Mr. President, you said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be...
Well, I think
I love it, dude. The Orwellian... You can't ignore Orwell. You can't forget about it. It's it's a war, it's also not a war. It's just beginning, it's also almost over. Our goal is regime change. We don't really care about regime change. It really is just one contradiction after another. The Strait of Hormuz is open. No, it's not. Unconditional surrender. We want a good deal.
You can say both. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of building a new country.
The beginning,
but they have no navy. They have no air.
That can be 1,000 thumbnails.
Well, I think you can say
This can be 1,000 thumbnails from now on. We just need to put this on every thumbnail with Trump going forward. Love it.
The beginning. It's the beginning of building a new country, but they have no
navy.
New
country. Building a new country. By the way, Trump followed up today by saying in a post, he's like, I don't know if he specifically invoked Carthage, but he was like, we'll make sure that no country... Actually, I should quote him verbatim, shouldn't I? Let's quote verbatim. Trump, Iran. It was like an insane tweet. You can never imagine George Bush or the neocons. That's why, whenever I hear a lefty or, I don't know what to call them, the... anti-Bush types who are like, Bush is still worse than Trump. I'm just like, I can't even conceive of Bush saying anything this evil. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Quote. Direct quote from the alleged president. We'll talk about that today too. If Iran does anything that stops the flow of oil within the Strait of Hormuz, they've already done stuff like this, they will be hit by the United States of America. 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far. Additionally, we will take out easily destroyable targets that will make it, quote, virtually impossible for Iran to ever be built back as a nation again. Death, fire, and fury will rain upon them, but I hope and pray that it does not happen. Query, I think that's threatening genocide definitionally, right? It's some word. I don't know what would we call it. I think it's, maybe he's just saying as a consequence, it would be impossible for Iran to ever be built back again. And that's not the basis under which he would do this. But it's pretty close to the line. I think he's like threatening some light version of genocide or something. I don't know why I say light. It's just like, because he says, oh, but I don't believe him. He's like, I hope it doesn't happen or whatever. But I think he's threatening something like that. We'll have to consult our international law dictionaries. This is a gift from the United States of America to China and all of those nations that heavily use the Hormuz Strait. Hopefully, it is a gesture that will be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And so that is after this press conference. That just happened today.
No Air Force. They have no anti-aircraft equipment.
You say it's at the end. Your defense secretary says it's the beginning, which was kind of both, right? You know, it's like time's a circle, right? There is no end. There's no beginning. There's no end, because time is just a circle. And really, what is time if not a construct that we ourselves have created? And really, who are you to tell me? We just had daylight savings time, right? Who are you to tell me how time works? This is what I mean, guys. This is what I mean. This guy's in charge of the most powerful military force on earth, and he's directing military strategy as we launch a foreign regime change war against Iran.
Clarice.
He can't tell us if we're at the beginning or the end, and quite frankly, he doesn't know either. What he does know deep down is that the backlash to this is atrocious, and so he's desperate to say anything and everything he possibly can to avoid the political consequence. Well, let's continue.
But while we're doing all of these things, we're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete. We've wiped every single force in Iran out very completely. Most of Iran's naval power has been...
I love that little look at the camera. Very completely. Josiah look. It's like Jim Halpert. It's giving Jim. Can't you just imagine Jim Halpert? Just look to your right and just imagine Jim Halpert, right?
In Iran out very completely. Most of Iran's naval power has been...
Yes.
Sunk. It's on the bottom of the sea.
So he's slurring a lot, right? Slurring, and now he's saying it's again.
Is that okay? We're just going to let Josiah do that?
He's doing that thing. Total victory. There's no Iranian military. It's all gone, totally wiped out. So I guess there won't be any more civilian or American casualties. I guess we can just wrap the whole thing up and go home. I guess we don't need to see domestic economic price shocks, right? What the hell are you talking about? There's no evidence that this whole thing is wrapped up. The evidence seems to be it's only intensifying. But again, think about his motive. His motive isn't to tell you the truth. His motive is to gaslight you into not punishing him and his party politically.
We've struck over 5,000 targets to date, some of them very major targets, and we've left some of the most important targets for later in case we need to do it. If we hit them, it's going to take many years for them to be rebuilt, having to do with electricity production and many other things. So we're not looking to do that if we don't have to. But they're the kind of things that are very easy to hit, but very devastating if they are hit. We are waiting to see.
Yeah, what is he talking about? Like hospitals and stuff?
What happens before we hit them? We could take them all out in one day, but it's all resulting in a 90% decline in various things, but in particular...
Is it going to do it again? Is it going to do it again? He kills me, man.
I don't know what any of that is. 5,000 targets. One of the targets was apparently an Iranian girls' school. Killed 175 Iranian schoolgirls. I mean, they just vaporized a major oil site. Like if you look at pictures of or video of Tehran, it looks like a true hellscape. I mean, just.
And I want to be clear. Like, I don't know that Americans literally targeted young girls. If that happened, that would be like one of the most. We have greatly reduced their missile stocks by intercepting them with our very advanced radars, but we can always build new ones. I feel like those radars are expensive. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know how easy they are to explain. Or sorry, to create. What was I saying just now? I was saying something.
Columns, mountains of smoke.
Oh, yeah. So, like, I don't think that the Americans targeted the school. But that's just because of my, like, maybe that's just because I don't want to believe it. I don't know that it would serve their interest to do so. Maybe if you're conspiratorial minded, it's like Israel gave them bad intel so that Iran would not come to the negotiating table and be more like recalcitrant, and so they gave the info to Americans. But even that would be like an Iran theory, right? Sorry, an Israel theory. But I just don't see evidence for that, you know. And that being said, there ought to be obviously like a full investigation. And in a second, I'm going to switch over to talk about a double standard. I know. We always have to do double standard stuff, but we have to do it. Doug Pacino says, guys, Trump didn't lie in 2024. Y'all just misheard Trump when he ran on no new wars. He was saying, no, new wars. That's a Simpsons meme, right? That's Lionel Hutz meme. Look at me remembering. The Pentagon already said that they believe we target. No, but when I say targeted, I mean like targeted knowing it was a girls' school, right? That's what I mean. Targeted for the purpose of eliminating like the school children there, you know? Yeah, that's what I mean. Is anyone surprised that the TMU authoritarian dictator who double tapped a boat is talking about exterminating an entire race of people? Yeah, I don't think that he I don't think that he would want that as his ideal outcome. I think that this indicates, because I don't think that he views it in his own self-interest, not that he isn't above doing horrific war crimes and murdering people in this context, because I definitely do not put that above him. What I think it demonstrates is almost as bad in a sense. It shows that he has completely lost the escalation war as it is, in that he has lost control of the situation and is unable to deter anymore without huge investments of resources. And so even though I think that they're not above putting boots on the ground just because they would try to save face or something, I do think an ideal outcome internally, based on like some of how they're posturing, would be to end this engagement soon. Again, I don't think that they're above putting troops on the ground and escalating, but I think that the kind of bombastic rhetoric in some way is showing the hands of an administration that has lost the escalation war, the escalation ladder, or whatever you want to call it, right? He's unable to further deter, and he's just trying to see what sticks. You know, they've already surrendered. We've already won. You better not do it or we'll destroy everything. Yeah. And yeah, the stock market stuff, at this point, I'm not even sure if this just might be like a side thing to affect the oil prices, you know?
I mean, it's like a friggin' Mordor now. And so again, what is he talking about? So you're saying that you're avoiding hitting critical infrastructure because the evidence seems to be that you're pummeling. Lindsey Graham issued a statement saying, whoa, listen.
Did he really? I didn't see that.
He's like, you know, guys, nothing gets me harder than the idea of, Iranians on fire. But even I.
Wait a second. Now, I have no reason to believe that this is true. I have no reason to believe that there's anything like this going on. But, there was such a funny Lindsey Graham thing. Let me press play while I
think you got to calm down, right? Lindsey Graham, of all people, is like, he's like, oh, listen, I need you to pump the brakes a little bit. Trump wants you to believe it's totally targeted, totally precise. But again, we also vaporized a school full of children. The total contradiction between the fact on the ground and the reality that he wants you to believe, which is not reality at all.
We know where they all are. We're knocking them out very quickly. We're ahead of our initial timeline by a lot. I would say that we probably...
Magic says, I think he's used to putting the toothpaste back in the tube. I don't know if he's going to succeed this time. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's in Iran's interest at this point in time to all right, this is what I found today from Lindsey Graham. And then I'll do my little Iran side point. And all the while noting that I'm not an IR expert. I'm not a subject matter expert. And I know that you guys know that, but just keep that in mind. It's just my musings as a mere nobody.
Hey, Lindsay, why don't you just admit that you're gay and then people won't blackmail you anymore?
Sorry. I don't endorse. I don't have any proof of this.
Hey, Lindsay, why don't you just admit that you're gay and then people won't blackmail you anymore?
I just had to show you guys that. I don't endorse though. I really don't. Just imagine like a line of people blackmailing him and him having to like, it's just a very funny joke. Thank you so much for the sub, Pure Jerky. Yeah, my take on the Iran stuff is like, I'm not sure it's in their interest to just pause right now, because then it's just going to give an opportunity for Israel and America to reload, right? And to re-ratchet it up after, and like avoid this like pending missile gap with deflector gap or whatever they're the missile interceptor gap, right? Where the economy, even though great pain is being inflicted on Iran, there's the real damage, the real hurt from an economic and a geostrategic sense vis-a-vis the alliances with the Gulf states, when that starts to become more and more online and intolerable. And so we've done the intolerable thing to Iran. Now, I'm not sure that Iran's interest is a quick resolution. I think they need to reassert deterrence. Iran does, from their perspective. And not until they reassert deterrence, because they don't want to have to deal with this in the future when, relatively speaking, the belligerents will be worse off. That's one of the things, like, post the first war last year, you can see it as part of a continuation of the same war now, or as different discrete wars. They're both wars, though. That period, though, of the conflict of the war, there wasn't like a huge lavish response from Iran. I guess the conventional wisdom being, let's not get Israel's Jimmy's Russells, let's not let them give an excuse. But at this point, I think that Iran knows that Trump is a little boxed in order to reassert his or the American deterrence or the American, power dynamic. I think it would involve massive investment that they're playing chicken. They don't think that Trump has the stomach for it. That is to say, boots on the ground, a wide scale commitment. Now, they got to be careful with that, because at a certain amount of pain, I think Trump is emotional enough to do that. But maybe they've priced that in too, and think that would swiftly unwrap. Like they would be. I think that they're preparing for that eventuality too. But they just view that possibility that the worst case scenario is make a peace now, let them reload, and let them come back again in the future. That's the worst case scenario, perhaps. Magic says, taking out the anti-nuke Ayatollah backfired. Well, anti-nuke Ayatollah, I know that there was a fatwa or whatever. I think they were getting nukes, and America might have to abandon some military bases. This would be like the worst of all possible worlds as far as America's concerned, which is why I think there will be plenty of criticism from the class of influencer and politician. Let's list them. Lindsey Graham. Who's the Fox News guys? Oh my God. Guy. What's his name? Fuck. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. You guys know him. You know him. Levine, right? Is it Mark Levin? These kinds of people, I think, will criticize the action at all if Trump just de-escalates and goes away. I think Graham would too. Because that would be like worse. If there is this reasserted interest, or you could say a more determined interest in pursuing a nuclear weapons program. Especially given the intel that before they weren't pursuing that. So yeah. We need Geraldo. Dude, after Geraldo was totally destroyed by Adam, I don't know that we need to hear from Geraldo anymore.
Probably would not have thought after a month we'd be here, in addition to the fact that we've taken out the leadership twice and maybe three times.
3 times.
including reportedly the candidates that Trump had in mind to replace the Ayatollah. And by the way, apparently there's a new Ayatollah, the old Ayatollah's son, who went from Khomeini to Khomeini Jr.
People that died through the roadside bombs, died and are right now walking around with no legs, no arms, a face that's been so badly damaged. The Iranian people that
walking around with no legs. That's what I'm saying. Like, he's just riffing off the cuff. Just totally riffing off the cuff. Man, just give us the facts as we know it. So there he talks about regime change, even though it's not a war of regime change. Don't go saying it's a war of regime change. It's not about regime change. We're just changing the regime through war.
And you can see that he's using up a lot of political capital and attention on this war. And so all of the, I think, fooled populists, rightoids, who are like, just focus on America, please. And again, I don't think they speak for the majority of MAGA. I think the majority of MAGA is behind their quote-unquote president. But those influencers, like, please don't do the war. You can understand why what they're saying from their perspective makes sense, because they know that this is going to crowd out other policies that they want and is going to drown out a great deal of rhetoric that they might otherwise use for the midterms, which will be dominated by this conflict, even if it ends shortly. It's been sustained enough, and the deaths that we've already had of American service people, because they don't really give a shit about anyone else is dead. I think that that's going to, in their minds, crowd out, distort the pure MAGA message. Now, I think a lot of this is revisionism. I think Michael Tracy is correct when he observes that the Donald Dove narrative is like a complete fabrication built on lies and very, very stupid people believing nonsense rhetoric. They're like, yeah, no new wars, no new wars. Meanwhile, he's like supported every single war. There isn't a single war that he hasn't supported in the last 20, 30 years. Even the people who said that Biden started the Ukraine war, which is itself ludicrous, laughable, just disqualifying for you to have any opinion on anything. If you say like Biden started Ukraine war. Trump was like bragging about giving Ukraine munitions and stuff. And so it's not like he didn't supporting Ukraine, at least in those moments that ostensibly led to the thing, right? It's not like I understand he gives less support to Ukraine or whatever, but it's not like he's categorically against U.S. supplying lethal aid to Ukraine. In fact, he brags about being one of the first presidents to do that, and that he's the reason why Ukraine has been able to fight back, etc. At least I said that at some point. I know that he also says, if I was there, it wouldn't have happened. But in essence, he can't identify like a specific thing, namely like not investing in lethal aid for Ukraine, that he would have like taken to show that he would be against that war, even if you grant that America started that war, which of course is nonsense. Same thing with like the Iraq war he supported and lies and says he wasn't in support of it. He attacked the government of Syria, which Obama never did. Right? He supported the attack on ISIS that Obama did. So if you thought that was a justified action, Trump was in line with that. Trump attacked Iran in the sense of they attacked Soleimani in the 2020, I think 2020, right? So yeah, I just like there's no Kyle Kalinske is absolutely correct. There's nothing in his track record, either in terms of like vocalized positions or actions taken, that would show that he's a dove. Literally zero. But I understand the angst from the MAGA right-wing populist space. Again, overstated. It's almost like talking about, in some ways, the traditional Republican. The traditional Republicans who aren't... It's a small minority. Most of the Republicans are behind their leader, Trump. But yeah, it is going to be a big deal, I think, in the coming midterms, because it affects, not only is it because of the rhetoric, the empty rhetoric, the absolutely obviously empty rhetoric of no new wars, and because potentially this conflicts affect on prices, energy prices, it's like the perfect storm, I think, to depress MAGA, certain contingents of MAGA, and enthuse a lot of contingents of Democrats and people who care about prices.
That we've taken out the leadership twice and maybe 3 times. And we, as you know, we want to be involved. We don't want another president that maybe wouldn't be willing to do what I'm willing to do for the good of the world, for the good of our nation, to be stuck with a situation in 5 years or 10 years from now. So we think they should put a president in, or the head of the country in, that's going to be able to do something peacefully for a change. They've been.
That's regime change, man. That's regime change. And listen, the old Ayatollah was terrible. But reportedly, again, you've effectively anointed his son, whether you intended to or not. And reportedly, he's even more hardline and conservative than the previous Ayatollah. And again, when you say things like, well, we hope they put in somebody that we can work with, that's regime change. And you're simultaneously saying this isn't about regime change. There's a total misalignment. These things are mutually exclusive propositions. And Trump's too stupid to understand. He's hoping he could just gaslight you into believing these mutually exclusive propositions.
The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me, Marco, so involved, that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us.
Why would Iran attack us under the circumstances that we've already, we hit them with Operation Midnight Hammer. Israel's hit them. Many of their proxies have been depleted. Why would they seek, while they're already on the back foot, why would they provoke a war with the most powerful military on earth? And again, no evidence whatsoever. The evidence sits to the contrary. They produce no evidence suggesting that.
Yeah, why would they launch attacks at our aircraft carriers? We had intelligence they were about to attack. What? It makes no sense whatsoever. None of this adds up. It's so obviously a pack of lies. They don't even try to sound convincing. Oh, there was who did the compilation? There was a compilation of everyone going with the party rhetoric of it's a small price thing momentarily. It was like they all got the new codes. It's like that meme of the soy jack getting the codes. I forget who did it, but there is just no direction. The messaging is awful. The messaging is terrible. It reminds me a lot of the messaging on Epstein. Did CNN do that? Yeah, maybe they did it. Yeah. It reminds me on the message on Epstein where it's they can't get their story straight.
Iran was on the verge of initiating a war against the United States. You know what has happened though? They've hit us since then. They bombed, U.S. forces in Kuwait. They killed 6 American service members, wounding others as well. Did you just create a self-fulfilling prophecy?
And there was an interview with the guy who was injured outside, who turned to the left and saw a drone coming to kill his fellow countrymen. It's pretty fucked up. I know it's just the story of our people. Can you imagine being one of these parents in Iran? These are real people. I know to certain of the people running this administration, they don't think that these are real people. But for them to just flagrantly lie and be oh yeah, it's an Iranian Tomahawk missile that they launched against their own school. I'm dude. But anyway, it's very harrowing.
Prophecy.
Fury, we're also focused on keeping energy and oil flowing to the world. And I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply. And if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level. I will take out those targets that were easy and that I mentioned just before.
They've effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is caused the price of oil and gasoline to skyrocket. So again, he's saying things that misalign with not only the facts on the ground, but what he said. If that's true, why aren't you hitting them harder now? What is it? What is preventing you from doing what you say you're going to do? This is just about...
None of this is consistent with allowing the regime to maintain itself. Here's something that I don't think that the administration is grasping, and maybe not even the markets. It feels like the effect on prices, at least in the short to midterm, is already... The effect is already going to happen, because even if they don't have the capacity to launch full-out attacks on every ship that passes through the strait, the threat is enough there, right? Even if it's just the occasional mine or the occasional drone that gets through, the threat is enough to be too much for insurance companies, too much for a lot of the shipping, right? So it really does feel like we crossed the threshold where it's not simple to undo it. Do you all agree? It feels like once the war gets started, unless there's security that shit isn't going to pop off again in a week, there's going to be, the security premium. Yeah. It feels like that's just going to be a fact. Okay, your attention. What is it? Sorry. My bad. Sorry. Sorry, I was a little rude. Didn't mean to lose my shit with you. I'm just not. It's not easy for me to click links from Twitch, but I'll make it easy. Just give me a sec. I'm coming. All right. You're like the equivalent of Stewie. Mommy, mama. Didn't want to lose it with you. But now we can all take a look at your link. We can be like, you made this? You made this? I made this. I know they're backing me up. I'm sorry. Sorry. Hey. You know I still love you. All right, this was made by Mr. Mandela, or do we say Mandela? What do we call you? This was made by him. I don't know what this is. This is boats. Any boats? Oh my god, look at these bunkers. Is this the Gears of War theme song? Holy. Are they just going in a loop? Is this AI? How do we know it's real? It's confirmed? Those are naval mines on the floor? Where are OPSEC people? Or what are they called? Not OPSEC. They're OSINT? Yes, this... Is that the Uncharted theme song? I thought I heard it. Let's get the two oldest people in Iran to do this little walk. Look. Sorry. I'm sorry. در مقابل دشمنان کوچک و بزرگ با هر استعدادی هماوردی شرافتمندانه و پیروزمندانه ای رو انجام بدن. فرمانده کل سپاه در بازدید از این پایگاه زیرزمینی نیروی This is what my chatter wanted me to see. حالا این نیرو توانایی مقابله با تهدیدات حتی خارج از خلیج فارس رو داره. به اینجا رسیده. فرمانده نیروی دریایی سپاه میگوید این نیرو اکنون توانایی انجام عملیات‌های طولانی. Okay, everyone clap. Get some yeps in the chat. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mandela. We really appreciate this. That was very enriching. I think we can all agree. We can all agree. Very enriching. Very good.
Spinning because he knows the polling is against him.
So the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain safe. We have a lot of Navy ships there. We have the best equipment in the world, inspecting for mines. Again, most of their ships are down at the bottom of the sea, but we will hit them so hard that it will not be possible for them or anybody else helping them to ever recover that section of the. They're never gonna.
Well, all I can tell you is, as of right now, we've been discussing this. The reporting is that the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed for business. Now, Trump has the temerity to say, "Hey, gas and oil prices are actually pretty low. Don't worry about it."
In recent years,
can I just say, look at that smooth talking. Temerity. What a great word. There's a video that Kyle made on Tallarico that I will interest you based on what you say is your #1 issue for 2028. Ooh. Ooh, okay. You're going to post a little clip? Well, Twitch gets a clip, so why doesn't YouTube get a clip? Can we finish this and then you give it to me? Pause. Holy shit. Pause. No one clipped that. Hey, yo! Whoa! Whew! Whoa!
Now, Trump has the temerity to say, hey, gas and oil prices are actually pretty low. Don't worry about it.
In recent years, the regime and its terror proxies have launched attacks on hundreds of commercial vessels.
Sorry,
We're putting an end to all of this threat once and for all, and the result will be lower oil prices, oil and gas prices for American families. We've done that. We've done it. We brought it very low. This was just an excursion into something that had to be done.
Says, don't believe your lying eyes. Sure, red states are seeing gas prices go through the roof, as are blue states, quite frankly. Yes, it's a direct consequence of his regime change war in Iran. But hey, don't worry about it. We actually brought gas low. Just don't believe your lying eyes.
Coffee makes me
also,
do crazy things.
This is an excursion.
Also, I want to
don't
tell
worry
you
about
guys
it, but we also might have another excursion.
Coffee for me, it's like a weird thing. I can have coffee. I don't know if you guys are one of these people. I can have coffee at night, and it lets me like I don't like stay up a million years because of it. Hey, yo, whoa. But however, sometimes I'll say just crazy shit. Who knows? But yeah, sorry. You can put the clip in YouTube after we're done with this.
With Cuba,
he's dealing, and it may be a friendly takeover. It may not be a friendly takeover. It wouldn't matter because they're down to.
Did you say that you didn't think that the U.S. at the school intentionally targeted the school as a school? Right? That's what I was trying to say. I don't think that, like they targeted the kids because they're kids as like a. I think they probably had either bad intel, right? Or I don't really think, even from a strategic sense, it helps the American position to have done that. Caffeine still messes up your REM sleep? Oh shit, should I not do this? Everyone is telling me I have issues. Do I have ADHD?
As they say, fumes. They have no energy. They have no money. They're in deep trouble.
He's talking about Cuba in this particular instance. He was asked by Manu Raju about the reports that the United States was the one that killed those school children. This is how he responded.
There's footage that shows that an American missile strike and a Tomahawk missile likely destroyed that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility?
Well, I haven't seen it. And I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, sold and used by other countries. You know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more. But whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries. But that's being investigated right now.
Is that true? I don't know if that's true, Mr. President.
Again, the mounting evidence, which is disturbing both Megyn Kelly and Laura Ingraham, is that the United States was the one to do this. Now, Trump has to go back to an oldie but a goodie because he knows this isn't persuasive. So he has to, play the greatest hits. And the greatest
Iran does not have Tomahawks.
Is the idea that Iran was 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon.
The B-2 bombers, which took out their nuclear capability, and they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And they would have
It's always 2 weeks with this dude. I feel like this dude's always like 2 weeks away from
used it long before this press conference. And we might have had a much different press conference if we had a press conference at all. But it's been amazing. The military success that we've had is truly unprecedented.
He said he totally obliterated the nuclear program. Now he's saying they were 2 to 4 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon, which strongly suggests that, in fact, you didn't obliterate their nuclear program.
Wait, no, mistake.
Or you're lying
correction.
now, or
correction. Wait, we got to correct him. But on my correcting. These are like. I gotta be careful. These are glasses that, like, if they had color, I feel like they're the kind of glasses like an NBA star might wear. The very like thick rimmed, goofy glasses. You know what I'm talking about? There's that Key and Peele sketch that I always think about where he's like parodying Kevin Garnett. You can do anything. And then it immediately, he's like, you can go on the fucking highway. And then it cuts to him with the glasses. All right. Correction on the play. Trump said, had we not obliterated, they would have been 2 to 4 weeks away. So I think Josiah is conflating here.
Conference. And we might have had a much different press conference if we had a press conference at all. But it's been amazing. The military success that we've had is truly unprecedented.
He said he totally obliterated the nuclear program. Now he's saying they were 2 to 4 weeks away from having a.
I think before they obliterate. I think that's the best hearing. I think that's the best reading. I think that's the best reading. Maybe I'm wrong.
nuclear weapon would strongly suggest that, in fact,
I think that's fair. You guys might the messenger signature look of superiority. It's an old meme too.
you didn't obliterate their nuclear program, or you were lying then, or you're lying now, or knowing Trump, he's lying both times. He can do that. He's a multitasker. He can lie with abandon, lie with impunity.
Impunity? Did he say impunity or impunity? I can't even talk. Did he say impunity?
He can do that. He's a multitasker. He can lie with abandon, lie with impunity.
Impunity. You hear the N or the M?
Knowing Trump, he's lying both times. He can do that. He's a multitasker. He can lie with abandon, lie with impunity.
What's the all right? So 1 if it's impunity, 2 if it's impunity. What do we think? You hear the M? You said it right. All right.
Then he's a multitasker. He can lie with abandon, lie with impunity.
Oh, he did. Okay. All right. He said it.
Yeah.
Has Iran activated any sleeper cells
said it fine.
inside the U.S.? There's reports that they have pressed that trigger button to activate those cells, at least abroad.
Well, they've been trying for a long time. We've been very much on top of it. One of the things we have to do is get the Democrats to stop the Democrat shutdown, because, as you know, the apparatus that looks into that, Schumer and the Democrats have shut it down.
So the DHS is still funded, at least a lot of their capacity. And if Donald Trump wants to end the government shutdown, he needs to negotiate with the Democrats.
Hell
whose votes
yeah.
He needs.
Based. See, Josiah gets it. He gets it.
By the way, if something like that were to happen on American soil, I mean, we already had the shooting in Austin, and reportedly the shooter had motives pertaining to Trump's attack on Iran. That's Donald Trump's fault. He started this war. He, is ultimately responsible for any sort of blowback violence that targets the American people because of this reckless, stupid regime change.
Well, I want to get to that in a fucking
second.
Clip. I want to get to that in a second.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Mr. President, you just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something.
I'm the one saying this because I don't know enough about it. We elected, by we I mean you. I didn't do shit. I didn't fucking do this. Just kidding. Collectively, we elected this guy.
Thing that I was told is under investigation.
I was told it was under investigation, so I just kind of made up the idea that maybe Iran did it to themselves, which I suppose is possible. The investigation's not been concluded, but again, the evidence has been mounting that we were, in fact, the United States was, in fact, that Donald Trump was, in fact, responsible. I want to close with one last clip, since we're on the theme of Iranian war casualties, including Iranian civilians. He's asked about American service members and American casualties.
Mr. President, as of today, there have been 8 U.S. military fatalities associated with the war in Iran. How many American deaths are you willing to have in this war?
Well, as I said before, when you have conflicts like this, you always have death. And I was at Dover yesterday. I met the parents, and they were unbelievable people. But they all had one thing in common. They said to me one thing, every single one: finish the job, sir. Please finish the job. And I'll leave you at that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, of course, he wants to cut and run after he's been given a question about American fatalities. The American fatalities are Donald Trump's fault. Donald Trump disrespected 6 of the 8
finish the job, sir.
American casualties by wearing a hat to their dignified transfer. He doesn't give a damn about the American people. He doesn't give a damn about
But on that note, I do want to talk a little bit about the double standard, because even though I don't like to dwell there these days, because it's so obvious, it becomes boring at a certain point to dwell on the double standards. Like, in their nature, water is wet. Oxygen is the element that brings air. No, wait. Air is mostly nitrogen, right? Oxygen's symbol is an O. I'm trying to do truisms and I already fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Blah, 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 blah. And Republicans are hypocrites. But I want to dwell on it a little bit. Okay? Just for a second. This is the family member of a service person who died in Biden's withdrawal of Afghanistan. Listen to him.
Not a single general slapped down their stars, which should have happened 2 years ago when Biden ignored his reliable intelligence. Not a single person has been held accountable. Our so-called leader can't seem to even utter their names in public, not even once. Mr. Biden has run his entire political campaign for 50 years as the family man. Well, I've got news for you, sir. The curtain has been lifting, and that campaign slogan will never work again. We have seen what's going on in your family, and even worse, we've seen how you've been treating us as Gold Star families. And there couldn't be anything more disgusting and cowardly than the way you have treated us. You are a disgrace to this nation. You have no business having ultimate command over our military, and I regret not saying that to your face when I had the opportunity in Dover.
Pussy.
I felt it more important to bite my tongue, but I also had more important things on my mind at that time, like receiving my son's lifeless body stateside. While I stood there on the tarmac, watching you check your watch over and over again, all I wanted to do was shout out, "It's 2:30.
Now, some of you might have recoiled, and we'll let it finish in a second, at me talking shit about this person. And, you know, I understand you're distraught. I understand you've suffered calamitous loss. I understood that in the context of the woman that they brought up after Kilmar Abrego Garcia was illegally rendered, and they brought up this mom whose child died tragically and was murdered tragically to give a basis for why it's like okay to like deprive people of due process and send them to torture dungeons. I understand that feeling. But when you engage in the political discourse, you cannot use your status as a grieving family member as both a sword and a shield. You should never allow this. You cannot use that status as a sword and a shield. You can definitely cite to your experience and use that to inform public discourse, no doubt about it. But you will be judged on the merits of what you're saying. And for you to stand there, and take this great exception, oh, Joe Biden checked his watch and it made us feel bad in that moment. In this totally performative decorum session, ascribing to Biden, like, I don't know, all the reason for all the death that occurred that day, it is a standard that would never be applied to MAGA, never be applied to Trump. It was an awful attack that occurred that killed his child. But this kind of shit rubs me the wrong way. I'm just going to say it. And when Trump will repeatedly say things like, oh, this is what happens, death is going to happen. Can you imagine if Joe Biden said that shit? Mr. Biden, sir, what do you have to say about the dead service members who died in this awful attack? Death is going to happen. It's going to happen. Whenever we do these kinds of things that are right for the nation, death is going to happen. Wearing his hat, it would have been no end of drama. Do you hear even one Republican congressperson who was sowing out about how Biden disrespected the families of the fallen? Do you hear even one of them talking shit about how Trump is referring to the dead service people? How Trump wore his baseball cap in receiving them, didn't arrive for the other service person when J.D. Vance was there? Have you heard a single critique from MAGA? And that's how you know they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit.
Watching you check your watch over and over again, all I wanted to do was shout out, "It's 2:30, asshole." But out of respect to the other grieving families, I bit my tongue once again. Well, as you could probably tell by now, I'm done biting my tongue.
Yeah, we can tell.
You, sir, stole their lives, their futures, their dreams, and have ripped.
Biden is responsible for ISIS, he says, attacking Americans. Biden is responsible. By that logic, Trump is responsible, right? If you accept this, because they knew this was the risk. Trump knew that if they were to do this attack, there would be imminent attacks on bases in the Middle East where American service people are stationed. They absolutely knew it. This was known years in advance. We've been talking about this. Everyone knows that that's one of the cards that Iran was gonna pull. Absolutely true. By that logic, Trump is responsible for their deaths. Only the difference here is, in the Biden situation, right? At a bare minimum, in the Biden situation, it wasn't the Taliban that attacked the service people who died. Right? Biden had an arrangement with the Taliban to exit the country. It was ISIS-K that attacked. Here, Iran is responding to an attack against them. An attack which, as Trump announced, was going to necessitate bloodshed. The withdrawal from Afghanistan did not have a necessary connection with service people death in the case of Biden. So, however you want to slice it, if the standard were to be consistent, you need to apply it to Trump. And you need to apply it on any other, outcome that might occur with respect to cells in America, right? Or maybe it's a little bit more nuanced than, he checked his watch and Biden killed your kid. And maybe we should also examine the merits of the policy, right? It's impossible to unlink those. It's impossible just to have this discussion from the perspective of a parent without examining the overall policy.
Depart 13 families. You cannot even man up and admit that.
You can't even man up and admit that you're responsible for the death of my child.
You, sir, gave us all the title Gold Star family. You, sir, discredit honor and integrity. 2 years later, there are things I find myself thinking about. Where and what was Biden's logic sneaking out of Bagram in the middle of the night before ever getting a single Afghan partner or American civilian out? This is the purest definition of intentional negligence.
Intentional negligence. What? I'm sorry. I'm going to intend to be negligent. So you're actually accusing Biden of intentionally being negligent. Negligence defined as not understanding a substantial and unjustified risk, right? Acting when there's but not knowing, right? That there's a substantial and unjustified risk. Intentional, I'm assuming you're saying like recklessly acting with the knowledge that there is a risk. Which, by the way, totally fucking is in line with Trump's actions here. But you heard reference to Bagram Air Base here, which is, again, more talking points. And you can tell this guy watches like MAGA News and shit. And watches Trump's Twitter feed or whatever, at this point in time, Truth Social feed, whatever it is. That we should have kept Bagram Air Base. There's this fixation on Bagram Air Base. And Trump, if he had his way, would have just stayed in Afghanistan, having a presence in Bagram Air Base, if you believe what he says. He's always trying to push off. He didn't take the actual step of getting troops out of Afghanistan. He pushed it off for the next guy. And as he tells it, as Trump tells it, he would have stayed there. And you have this guy injecting himself in the public discourse and trying to claim that Biden is, dishonoring public service because he checked his watch at the tarmac. A standard of decorum, a standard of respect that Trump has never demonstrated to service people. Introduce clip about John McCain, introduce testimony that he said these guys are all losers when it came to the World War II, whatever, or World War I commemoration. Introduced various different clips about him being cavalier and shit with the lives of military people. It's just all bullshittery. And none of the people who bandied about these clips, who hauled these family members into Congress, gave a shit about it then. And Trump just showed that he doesn't give a shit either. Okay, where were we? Next up. Let me think. What's next? Okay, let me talk a little bit about the Democratic angst from Lib and Learn, because I think I understand people's perspectives. I think that, and I do actually relate, and I'm sympathetic to everyone. So let me start. I'm sympathetic to Hutch. Let me start with Hutch. Because I think, in a narrow sense, I agree with a lot of his objections and IRIs. Thank you so much for the super chat. We'll do the Kyle clip in a sec. Trump had more respect for a podcaster than people who served the country and died. Why is anyone surprised? What are you expecting? Yeah, I know. I'm not surprised. I'm just calling attention to it. So let me start with Hutch and IRI. The specific question of what should we do that we're not already committed to doing is one where I more side with them. Where there's like, there seems to be a desire, and I understand the desire, to make it certain that these criminal, treasonous actors are in fact punished for their conduct. Eddie says, were there any troops deployed to any active conflicts under Biden? And if so, did he initiate any of those conflicts? I'm struggling to think of one. Let me think. There was engagement in Yemen, but I think that was also happening under Trump, right? I think there was engagement with the Houthis. Someone will tell me if that is wrong. There was support for Israel, obviously. But in terms of a Biden-initiated conflict, I'm trying to think about it. Syria, no. I mean, if you're talking ISIS, that's, again, continuation of Obama policy, which Trump continued. Somalia, maybe? Was there something in Somalia that I missed? I'm trying to think. Seriously. I don't consider Yemen to be like Biden owns it. I don't consider attacks on ISIS or Al Qaeda to be Biden owned conflicts. So yeah. And I don't consider like responses to Hamas's attack on Israel and Russia's full invasion of Ukraine to be Biden-initiated conflicts. You guys tell me if you disagree. Yeah. Tell me if you disagree, though. He started the Autopen Wars. The Autopen Wars. We were just getting... Bidenomics was just starting to work. We were finally being respected again. Okay, where was I? So, when it comes to Operation Uniper, what was that? Operation Uniper? Let me look that up. We'll do a little quick fact check. And thank you guys so much for the super chats and stuff. Operation Uniper Shields is dated 2007 to present. So I don't think that would be correct, right? Let me just Google international conflict started by Biden. Yeah, I guess I don't know what he started. Let me go to the Wikipedia. Huh. He sent troops to guard the embassy in Port-au-Prince in Haiti, but I don't consider that the start of a war. What else? Let's see. In Venezuela, he didn't attack Venezuela. He granted TPS to Venezuelans in America. In Europe, he obviously didn't attack Europe. Ukraine thing doesn't count, in my view. Didn't attack Russia. East Asia, didn't attack China. Let's see. Help defend Taiwan. North Korea, nothing, right? Indonesia, nothing. Myanmar. He condemned the coup in Myanmar. In the Philippines, let's say, he participated in a U.S. military-run propaganda campaign to spread disinformation about the Chinese COVID vaccine. Damn. The campaign was described as payback for COVID-19 disinformation by China. That's kind of fucked up. I want to learn more about that. The Middle East. Tighter controls on drone strikes. Special forces raids in Libya, Yemen. Again, I don't really... Those are like extensions of previous conflicts of Obama. Caucasus. Let's see, Iran. No. IP, we already talked about. Jordan, friends. North Africa, largely friends. Gulf states, you know, a little frosty at times, but no attacks. An Iranian-backed militia launched a missile attack in Erbil in northern Iraq. In retaliation, Biden ordered an airstrike on the Iranian-backed militias. This was the administration's first military action in February 2021. This is in Iraq. Seems like it's a bit stretching. It's not the same as the kind of things we're talking about. I don't know. You guys tell me. So it's not a question whether Biden started a war. Let's not shift the question. I think the question is whether he started a new war, right? No new wars. I think that's the question. Anything else is not the question, right? Wait, I was saying something. You guys distracted me. We're talking about something else. We're talking about Dems. Okay. So, on the specifics of what would Hutch or IRI not support that ought be supported, I struggle to think of examples of it. Because it's like a two-factor thing. I'm almost thinking from Hutch's and my perspective. Oh my God. Thank you so much for the super chat. Sorry, I don't mean to be... I appreciate the super chats. How do we distinguish creative, legally grave actions like impounding funds from outright unacceptable, illiberal actions? There's a zone before jailing. How do we distinguish creatively, legally grave actions? I think it has to do with like the nature of like how much of a departure is it from a good faith reading of whatever law or principle you think is can't be violated. So, for example, I think that the tariff one is particularly bad faith and illiberal in virtue of its, I think, flagrant violation of the Constitution. In a way that I didn't think that the student loans question was much more good faith. But I can give you a Biden example too. I think that Biden closing down the border was outright illiberal. So, you know, not saying that they're the same, that Biden is the same as Trump. I do think that there are certain degrees of proximity away from a good faith reading of what the principle is. And I can't define that exactly where that is, but there's easy cases and there's hard cases. But thank you for super chat. I keep having to restart. All right, focus. Here's where I sympathize with the other side. The feeling that there needs to be accountability. Now, I use that word purposely, right? Because I think that this is where a lot of the I do actually think a lot of the confusion or mismatch or talking past each other comes in the word choice. I do. And you might hate me for that opinion, but I promise you it's sincere. When we say this needs to happen, you can interpret that from like a strictly necessary, like it's strictly necessary that this occurs, or it would be really, really, really important or good if it occurs. And so when I say we need to see accountability, I mean the latter. I think it's really, really important for our democracy that we have accountability and punishment. But I don't say it's strictly necessary to preserve our Constitution. I think that there's a world in which such accountability and punishment doesn't arrive in the form I think it, quote, needs to. And that in fact, I think that's the most likely thing that does occur, is that we're able to maintain our republic, notwithstanding the lack of needed accountability. And even though accountability and punishment is my most important issue, right? It's my most important issue. So I'm not understating its importance. I really do think that punishment and accountability are top of my agenda. But the specific question isn't whether that's desirable, because I think that IRI and Hutch and I, we all agree that it is desirable. The question is, what are we willing to do to effectuate that desirable outcome? Now, let's cordon off certain hypotheticals. The Jack Bauer, what I'm calling the Jack Bauer situations, the ticking time bomb, the imminent coup, the seizure on election night of election machines. These kinds of scenarios where there's a ticking time clock or bomb or whatever. But the time part is, it's not strictly speaking necessary to this being a Jack Bauer situation. What I'm trying to get at are the kinds of situations where not only is there an existential issue, which I grant the anti-Republican nature of ironically, the Republicans is existential in the long run. No doubt about that. But that what's being proposed to resolve the Jack Bauer situation is likely to have that desired effect, and that the cure is not worse than the disease. So in the context of some outrageous action in the moment, for example, take January 6th, it would be justified, right, to do a host of different means. Now, the legal means should be tried first, and they were on January 6th, like, right? Force was exercised in a way commensurate with or consistent with our Constitution, and it was repelled. If that had been unsuccessful, right, there are methods by which we stop the imminent threat, and those methods should be tailored and should be actually have a good likelihood of ending the threat. And on that, I'm sure that there's massive agreement. In those Jack Bauer situations, yes, we will advocate for other things to prevent the nuke going off, and we will advocate for other actions to take place in the attempted coup moment, So that there's agreement there and there's concessions there. So the frustration, I think, from a lot of the people debating Hutch is like, we're in a Jack Bauer moment. It's just taking place over the long term, right? You don't realize it, but you're in that time. It's just like ebbing and flowing. Right now, it's like we are in the crisis moment that's been extended over a period of time, right? That's the kind of sense. Like, you don't realize that you're not out of it yet. You're in the eye of the hurricane. And I definitely relate to that. And I agree with that. We are in the eye of the hurricane. Here's the problem. Right now, where we are currently, elections have not turned off yet. And so we haven't reached an exhaustion principle, right? We haven't done... elections are still happening and Democrats are winning. And so there's no justification to an appeal to other kinds of remedies in the current environment. Not until we reach that exhaustion point in the current status quo, right? Notwithstanding us being in the eye of the hurricane. And most people agree with that, right? They're like, okay, we should go vote. We should participate in the democracy. No one, I think, is shouting, let's go march on Washington with our rifles and muskets. Right? No one's calling for that. So we're not dealing with those hypotheticals because people seem to still believe the elections are being run fairly currently. And I believe they are. What we're trying to imagine, therefore, notwithstanding us being in a crisis moment, is the specific situation in which we take power again, and now we have this power. What do we do with it to prevent future dissents? And now I think it's where it's more tricky, right? Now is where I think it's more tricky. Because whatever the proposal is, it needs to, I think, be of that existential threat. And the remedy needs to exhaust peaceful methods and lawful methods, and also be likely to achieve the reduction in the threat. And I think that a lot of the examples fail that test. Locking up Trump for a political offense, I think that there's plenty of things that you can lock Trump up for that aren't political offenses. Like, you can still charge him for the documents case in Florida, and you can still bring the charge for the Washington, D.C. case. Maybe Arizona and these other states should think about doing the same in their, when he's out of office. So there's plenty of legitimate grounds to indict this guy. But we're assuming that for whatever reason won't work because he resigns and then J.D. Vance pardons him immediately or something, right? And that there's no way to do a state charge, right? Even though there might be. Even though there literally might be a way to do a state charge. But we're presented okay, it doesn't work. For whatever reason, the actual avenues towards seeking real justice based on real crimes don't work, either because of pardons, lack of state political will. That would be if the problem is a lack of state political will, then that's that's what we need to go for first, right? If there's a lack of political will among Democrats to keep them accountable, then that's your bottleneck. That's what you need to address. Don't advocate for your Democratic leaders to take unconstitutional measures if they're not even willing to do constitutional measures. And I agree, the pardons are stupid. So let's keep going. Let's assume the states are willing, or the federal government is willing to pursue the constitutional routes of keeping him accountable for shit he actually definitely did, where there would be justice. Let's say it works, everything's great, right? If it doesn't work, now we got an issue, right? First, let's explore like why it doesn't work. If it doesn't work because juries of his peers find him not guilty, what then? Would people be in favor of locking him up for a political offense if for whatever reason the prosecution just blows it and they find him not guilty? I think most people say no. They'd be like, he had his shot in court. Let's not lock him up for a political offense. But it's unclear to me, right? Let's say he gets his day in court and he wins. I think we're dealing with a situation, these hypotheticals, where we're not able to get to that day in court because the courts cuck out or the pardons kick in. So I'm going to cordon off the situations in which he gets off because of, we might say, merits reasons. Merits reasons. Okay, he gets off because of merits reasons. Or not merits reasons. That is to say, because of a pardon, because of the application of some bullshit doctrine like the immunity doctrine. Now what, right? Because everyone up to there, everyone kind of agrees. Everyone kind of agrees. Exhausts peaceful legal. Everyone kind of agrees. If he's found guilty, great, no problem. I think most people would agree if he's found not guilty on a merit thing, like you didn't fulfill the elements, this crime isn't actually a crime, or you haven't risen to the standard under a fair interpretation of that standard, everyone's kind of chill. So we're now just dealing with a situation in which there is no like merits decision in his favor from a jury otherwise, and all methods have been exhausted. In that specific situation, would it be justified to charge him with like a political offense? By this I mean it's like a bullshit offense, that it's just because of it's not premised on any criminal conduct that's cognizable because of the exercise we just went through, right? If it were cognizable, it's already excluded because of our method failed, right? It's something else. The actual charge is maybe it pays lip service to actual criminal conduct, but we know for a certainty that it's not a good faith interpretation of whatever it is we're saying. Or there's like an attempt to ignore whatever process or authoritative interpretation of the thing. You get me? So here's what I'm trying to like insulate myself from. People saying, it's not bullshit because he actually did real crimes. We're just talking about the specific thing that is brought to bear against Trump, right? So in this situation in which all the legitimate bases have been kicked out because of bullshit, either bullshit, lack of political, whatever you want to say, right? The legitimate things are all out because we all agree if it's a legitimate crime, criminal misconduct, that kind of stuff, go after him for it. Everyone's on board there. So we're putting that to the side. And same thing on the pardon stuff, right? To the extent that, I've offered a pardon nullification idea. I think it's good faith. I would be totally on board with Democrats pursuing it. I don't think it's likely to work. But let's exhaust that too. You've tried to fight the pardons at every stage. Because all of us are in favor, I think, of if it's a good faith argument on the pardons, to exhaust that. So we're really trying to narrow in on what the actual disagreement is, because I do think that there's that like we're fighting air when we don't do that. We're like fighting ghosts of ghosts on both sides, right? On both sides. So we've exhausted the pardon challenge mechanisms through like the legitimate means. We've exhausted the actual crime bases to go after these people or Trump specifically. And now we're just envisioning charging him with a political offense. in that situation, here's why I'm against it and why I think Hutch is against it, right? Charging him with a political offense, we know is not acceptable under the Constitution, in my opinion. A true political offense. And so it would be, and there is no good faith basis to believe that it might not be, right? Again, we're specifically just looking at situations in which there's no good faith basis to believe it's acceptable under the Constitution. It's almost by definition unconstitutional based on how we're segmenting it. So we're already taking the immediate cost, the internal cost of knowingly violating the Constitution in bad faith. And that's going to be you're going to have to show a high standard to be like, yes, I'm okay with knowingly and in bad faith violating the Constitution because X. Now, you can sell me that there's a really important need, by which I mean it's very good policy that we punish these people because it'll apply some level of deterrence. Maybe not to the most crazy, because I don't think it will, but to some of the intermediary level, perhaps. Or for some of the more knowing actors. Think Rubios, think, who else am I putting in this category? Rubios, Hegseths. Maybe not Hegseth. The kind of McConnell types who are in the administration, Maybe there's some deterrence that can be had on them. Ted Cruz types, yeah, these types. Lindsey Graham types. So that's why I think it's such a good policy goal, is because I think the deterrence I think that deterrence is a huge, important thing. And also international demonstration. So I think it's really important for signaling domestically, though it won't necessarily deter the worst of the worst, which is my point in the discussion we had. Okay, so you can sell me on that. I don't think I can be sold that it's strictly necessary. I think that there are worlds in which the deterrence is not achieved. It's plausible to me. In fact, I think it's the most likely outcome, that the deterrence is not fully achieved, and yet our constitutional republic survives. I think that is most likely. And in fact, I think that's what's likely to happen. That even absent the specific deterrence or the general deterrence of punishment, that our republic will be able to continue. And that's the most likely outcome. Notwithstanding it being super important, I do think if I had to bet, I'm betting on America. Maybe that's the key difference there. But there's another, even if you were to move me on that and you say, no. There's a 2, 3, 5% chance that our republic will continue in the mid to long term, absent this general deterrence. All right. I don't agree with that, but let's say you're around there. You're 95, 96%, and maybe you even convince me. 95, 96% chance that absent this general deterrence, we are not going to be able to maintain our republic. All right, fine, you convinced me. Even if you were, and again, I'm not there, I'm the opposite, even though I think it's very important. You can't show me that the political charges are going to accomplish that. Because the political charges, in my opinion, the most likely scenario is they're going to get thrown out by courts. And if the decision is, well, then you just ignore. Now you're escalating into a place where I think it will backfire. I can't predict what the political situation will be in a year or in 2-3 years. But I don't think that escalation, just from a sheer pragmatism perspective, will accomplish the goal of deterrence. Because it will be fleeting, in my opinion. Because it won't work, in my opinion. And so I wouldn't recommend it. Just like, and this would be understandable to most people, you wouldn't advocate, okay, let's say that the political charge doesn't work, right? And you add another step to it, right? The political charges don't work. Now what? And someone tells you, well, we should video game, right? We should video game. And you're like, no, that's too far. Now, if you really think that the punishment and the deterrence is necessary for the longevity in the medium to long term, by necessary I mean strictly necessary, 95, 96%, that kind of stuff. If you really think it is, maybe you wouldn't maybe you just think it's Fed posting and you won't answer it, right, on a stream or whatever, but just think about it for yourself as though you were going to answer it. You could be consistent and say, well, I believe that the political charges are likely to succeed. I don't think the video game is likely to succeed. But we're with you there, just at the level of the political charges, in the sense that we don't think they'll work. And no one would be like, oh, you don't think Trump is that bad just because you're not willing to video game. You know? So it's not about not having necessarily the will to do the difficult thing. It's about not thinking that the difficult thing will work. You know? And it's a limited set of situations, I think, that we're even like disputing about. All right. So I've given the case about why I think I'm largely on with Hutch and I, right, on like the specific points of like what you would do in a situation in which this doesn't work, that doesn't work, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. We just have a different line, right? We just have a different line about what to do, of when to stop, of when to count your losses and say, this will just make things worse, right? Because you can imagine an escalation that makes things worse, right? It wouldn't be justified to lash out and attack these legislators or these officers if you think that it'll make things worse. And if you believe, as I do, that going with political charges will make things worse, not better, you understand that. In the same way that you might think that video gaming would make things worse, not better. Okay. Now for me to give like my sympathies for the other side, I think that there's two aspects to it. The first aspect to it is a general feeling that Democrats aren't doing enough. And I find that very, I don't know what to say. There is a kind of Schrodinger's Democrat feeling, I think, where on the one hand, it's so silly and so counterintuitive to say Democrats are not so much better than Republicans. And to even like try to put them on the same level is an insult and an affront. And I agree with that. Totally agree with that. And I understand it. But then also there is a kind of, I think, residual like, what the fuck, Dems, in some moments. And so that's one aspect I think that's driving a lot of this, is that like there is a feeling of powerlessness and some like real groaner moments where you just want to say, Democrats, do something. Not every Democrat, not all the time. And that powerlessness with respect to Democrats, or the feeling of inadequacy sometimes on Democrats, is also a broader like feeling of powerlessness that we're losing the country. Like you're looking around and you're seeing Rome be pillaged by barbarians, which is what's happening in some respect, in some areas, right? And that causes like righteous anger, like fuck these people. Like I don't ever want to hear their complaints again. And I want to just like I understand the rage. It is rage inducing to see the worst liars, the most vicious barbarians destroy things that you love and hurt people that you love. And it's like, if there is, there's a feeling like of just desserts, of retributive justice. You did this thing and now you need to be punished. And it's almost like animalistic. It's like, you hurt us. You hurt the people you were supposed to defend. They trusted you and you betrayed them. And that's like a very human emotion. Like I get it. And fuck if I don't feel that anger coursing through me like all the time. That it's like, if this were a just world, we would be seeing different things. And I want to make a just world, and I want it to be this way. And they can't keep getting away with it, right? It's like they can't keep getting away with it. And as much as you want to say, but it won't work, we don't want to hear that, dude. We don't want to hear that it won't work, because it just has to. It just has to work. And we don't want to live in a world where it won't work. We don't want to live in a world without justice. Reminds you a little bit of, Oberyn Martell, Game of Thrones, enters the dungeon where Tyrion Lannister is being held. Gives the story about how he first met Tyrion. If you want justice, you've come to the wrong place, and Oberyn can't accept it. I've come to the perfect place. And so there's this like inner viper in all of us. It's like, we want to make the justice. Like, don't tell me it's not possible. Don't tell me in this world of infinite possibility that there isn't a way to have justice for America, to have justice for Jimmy Kimmel, justice for all the people dying, all the grave degradations, the degeneracy of the administration. Don't tell me that, right? And anyone who tells me that, you just don't have the imagination, the gumption, the ingenuity, and the balls to do what is necessary to make justice happen. And that feeling, I totally understand and sympathize with it. And in some moments, in the conversation with Hutch, I'm like, oh, fuck. Because there is a kind of, in the course of making strategic recommendations, and even though I don't think that Hutch is properly represented in the specifics of what he's saying, it very much feels like a downplaying sometimes, even if that's not necessarily what he's doing. Sometimes I think he is downplaying. So, for example, the comparison that Hutch would make, well, even Trump hasn't done this. Even Trump hasn't done that. I'm like, I'm not sure I agree with that. And maybe he hasn't done this specific thing, but he's done things that are worse than that. Like, I'm not convinced that charging Trump with a political offense is worse than some of the stuff that Trump has done, let alone the cumulative effect of everything Trump has done, right? Like, because I think what's most likely to charge Trump with a political offense, the outcome would just be he would be set free in America, and everyone would rally around him, or at least the Republicans would, and they would all condemn and call for trials and shit, and basically he would be untouched by that. That's my thing. What's the most likely thing to happen? Because that's what I think is most likely to happen. I think that the renditions to Sikot are probably worse than that, and they're just, if not worse, from the constitutional perspective, a denial of due process, just throwing them on the fucking plane and sending them out to another country. That shit is worse. There's no review for that. They were trying to argue no review for that. At least a political offense is reviewable in that sense immediately, right? But there was some question, and what they were trying to do is remove all judicial review. So I think that the renditions to Sikot would be worse than charging Trump with a political offense. And so when Hutch says, well, they haven't even done this yet, I'm like, do you mean this specifically? And what can you call the Comey prosecution other than charging for a political offense? That's a bullshit charge. I know that there's an underlying alleged thing that is a crime there, but we really know that that they're trying to charge a political offense. Same thing with the actions contemplated against Joe Biden, which they didn't fully indict him, but they did indict Comey. And what they're trying to do with Mark Kelly and these other people. Now, they haven't indicted Mark Kelly yet, But again, they did indict James Comey. So like, yeah, and then that's just the seat-caught political offense comparison. When you put in the overwhelming scale of everything related to rights, it's like, I don't know, man. I don't think it's fair to say that like even Trump hasn't done this. Trump has gotten his people to charge political offenses. What he did with fucking Mayor Adams is practically as bad, almost as bad. It's 95% of the way there. Politically dropping a charge against a corrupt mayor. I mean, you're almost there, man. And again, we have the Comey stuff. The Comey stuff is so fucking horrible. Like, we are downplaying how horrible the Comey stuff is. So I totally get the frustration there with being like, oh, but Trump hasn't tried this. Like, dude, no, I mean, like, Trump would be worse than that. It would be everything Trump has done so far would be worse than charging Trump and his cronies with political offenses for which there would be immediate review and almost certainly would like fail or whatever, even though I'm not in favor of it. So I understand that aspect of it. Excuse me, sorry. There was another thing. On the war thing too, I think that Hutch's radar and danger senses should be activated by that too. Like war, and even recognizing that previous administrations have abused this too. I don't think anyone has done it as flagrantly and as horribly as Trump has. The power to do war is one of the ultimate powers of any state. It's like one of the ultimate sovereign exercise of authority is to go to war, not go to war, bring people into the fold, the draft, or not, get your sons and daughters to die for their country. Like, this is like a very core power. And it seems like our alarm bells turn off when it comes to foreign policy. I don't know why that is. It's just like, maybe because there's a feeling that the foreign doesn't affect the structure of the country, but it very much does. In that, foreign affects how the domestic policy of the country is often run or justified, and will often yield with it attendant violations of liberty and further erosion of the separation of powers on claims of states of exception. So I think that our alarm bells, and again, I love Hutch, and I think that he's generally right on the specifics of the hypotheticals. I think that we need to turn our alarm bells on when it comes to foreign stuff. That is very much like integrated here. And in the cover of foreign wars, horrible stuff can happen. I don't need to recite like when the final solution was ushered in, when the worst stuff happened, and even just in modern contexts, the kind of deprivations and fucked up shit that happens, Guantanamo Bay, torture, all this stuff. Not as bad as the Holocaust. I'm not saying they're all as bad as the Holocaust or the worst things, right? But I'm just trying to say that, like, your country's presence on the foreign stage, its involvement in wars, it is like, it's hard to disentangle that domestically. It's part of the greater context. Greater context for Reagan, for Clinton, Bush, Obama, all these guys. I mean, think about Caesar, right? Caesar, what was Caesar doing before he was recalled back to Rome? Anyway, I'm just monologuing and rambling at this point, but yeah, that's something where I can see a little bit of a blind spot. And then, and this might be the most sensitive part about it, Hutch's specific poo-pooing of potential solutions. There's almost like this feeling, and I understand it and relate to it a lot of times, of like lack of ambition a bit sometimes on some solutions, all right? Until there's like more consensus built among like institutional Democrats. Obama signs off on the filibuster. Okay, that's cool. All right, at this point, you're right. So I hope that makes sense. Like, I'm not saying that Hutch isn't ambitious. I'm saying there's a feeling that sometimes something will be like, oh, well, we could add members of the Supreme Court so we can unpack the court. And there's just almost like reluctance to be like, if we have the votes for that, I think that would be great. Instead of saying, I don't think that'll happen. If he said, listen, if we're able to get the votes, I would totally support that. Now, those are the same thing, right? But how he phrases it might cause people to think, like, dude, so what do you want to do? You just want to lay down in the middle of the street and get run over? What the fuck is your solution, right? So that's where I think a lot of it's coming from. It's almost even like, again, not all of it. I think there is some substantive disagreement on some of the hypothetical shit. I'm not saying it's all kind of feelings and it's all semantics, but like overly cautious or overly casually, like, no, we can't do that because if we do this, they'll do this. If we do this, they could really, the public could really turn on us. And even if it was just phrased like, man, I would be so excited to support that if it doesn't seem like it will negatively affect our electoral results, I would 100% support that. And here's, again, a point to HL as well. Like, I think a lot of the public hating the Democrats, like internal Democratic angst, is because they get this feeling that the Democrats like won't do anything until they poll test it, and that there's no like principle sometimes. Maybe even that's some of the aversion to Gavin Newsom at times is like he will say anything. I don't know if that's true. I have my good moments with Gavin, my bad moments with Gavin. From a distance, of course. He doesn't know me. But there's almost this feeling like, what do you stand for? And so it's capturing maybe a broader frustration of like, dude, are you really going to go through a focus group before you give an answer on this thing? Yeah, even the phrase, and we need to accept that Trump is going to get away with it. I don't think that what he's saying, like, I think the most likely situation is that Trump is not going to go to jail. I do think that's the most likely situation. It's just like how you phrase it will impact, like, even if you just added that. But I will do everything within my power consistent with the Constitution, and I will advocate that be done to make sure that justice is done, right? If you said, we need to accept and be ready for the eventuality that Trump doesn't go to jail, but I will be a voice in favor of doing everything we can to hold them accountable within the confines of my commitment to the Constitution or something like that, my commitment to the rule of law. If you just couched it in those terms, I think that it would go over like better. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Oh yeah, we're going to actually talk about the 14th Amendment in a little bit. In a little bit. And then this thing's like, we can reverse everything Trump has done. I just think that's like not true. I just think it's like not true. Like, I think it's very difficult to reverse the kind of structural damage to the bureaucracy, losing the institutional knowledge, losing the culture of a lot of these agencies, ripping apart entire departments, U.S. attorneys' offices, for example. It will, I think, disincentivize committed career servants because they'll, A, who wants to like rebuild the culture without having institutional knowledge there? B, who wants to do public service at all if you just know in 4 years we get some fucking crazy person who's going to make you public enemy number one in the similar vein of these like international conflicts? Who's going to trust America's word? If you're looking for a job, why would you go into public service if this is how you're going to be treated? And if you might be let go by some crazy person who brings in like some asshole like Elon Musk, I think it's really bad for morale. And it's actually not simple to reverse that. And that's putting aside all of the damage caused by Trump's policies, which isn't going to be easy to reverse either. The law that he put in called the Build Back Better law, that's a law that we have to deal with. That is going to defund Medicaid by like billions of dollars in a few years after Trump's in office, conveniently, right? All of the judiciary picks, he's probably going to get one or two more Supreme Court justices. Count on that. That's just taking like a little snapshot at some of the kind of irreversible, I really do think irreversible damage that Trump has done. I absolutely agree that it'll take decades to repair the damage, 100%. I mean, I've said this. I said this on. I think I said on election night. Certainly after, like, we will for the rest of our lives be spending time cleaning up this administration. And the thing that proves this is just the Supreme Court. But we don't even need that, right? Like, take the bureaucracy, take soft power internationally, take the effects of policies, take the law that he has passed, among other things, the lives that will have to be put back together. I mean, this is a all hands on deck project. And so I understand also, and I sympathize totally with the very negative response to that kind of thing. Now, what I think Hutch is saying, even though I think that there is a little downplaying, is more like we can just stop a lot of the policies because, like, per Ezra, for example, he's not like finalizing new rules in a lot of these areas. Oftentimes it's just like discrete deal making that doesn't fundamentally change policy in a wide sweeping fashion. And then his legislative agenda has been like bubkiss, except for one or two examples. Now that's true, but that doesn't mean that it's hard to disentangle the discrete deal making or the more like specific policy making that isn't represented across the entire field, let's say, of a topic or a given issue. It still will be the general approach of how they deal with government, the general approach of how they run the administration internationally as a kind of center for graft and bribery. That is going to be really, really toxic. It's almost like a general approach to governing. It's going to take time to show the world and our own fellow country person that America is open for business again, but we're going to follow the rules. And we're not going to let this just be pay for play all the time, no matter what. Trump is already banked. Yeah, of course. And also the deficit spending. We're just really talking about an aspect of it, right? Like, there's many other things that will be very difficult to unwind, no doubt. To say nothing of the war. All right, we'll take a look at the Talarico thing at some point. Impeachment itself is a political process. Do you distinguish from impeaching president over bad politics? This is really like key to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about impeachment. So impeachment, when I say something like impeachment is political, it's a shorthand, and I know this is going to be a little confusing. It's a shorthand for saying that it's run by the political branch of Congress. Political branch. So it's not a judicial proceeding. It's one that is legislative and run by a political branch. Okay? I understand the executive is politically appointed as well, but I don't think that the standard of impeachment is just whatever is politically, like, expedient. Okay? The standard for an impeachable offense is non-political, and that's a high crime or misdemeanor, term of art. Okay, it doesn't mean a crime in the code. Okay, the impeachment clause predates the U.S. Criminal Code. It was created before there was a U.S. Criminal Code. So just bear that in mind. I'm not going to support, because I have my own respect for the Constitution. I'm not going to vote to impeach or remove someone who I don't feel has committed a high crime or misdemeanor. Again, we can get into what that is, but this is something that is, in my opinion, not a political standard. This is, in my opinion, like a legal standard. Now, the political branch of Congress is the one to determine, to sort it out, right? And that is one that needs to be, like, firmly in the hands of Congress. courts don't have that power except for maybe to determine whether or not like the procedural safeguards of the impeachment clauses have been complied with, maybe at the outer edges. But I wouldn't support any impeachment that I thought would be politically savvy. I wouldn't do that. So here's an example, right? I don't think that there's been enough evidence to suggest that Sam Alito has committed a high crime or misdemeanor. And so notwithstanding that it's ultimately a political question, whether or not he is impeached, I would not support it because I don't think that the non-political standard of high crime or misdemeanor is met. And even though there would be no court to review it, right? I do think that we are, as Congress people, assuming, right? I'm a congressperson. Congress people are absolutely bound by the Constitution the same way the judiciary is. They swear an oath to the Constitution first and foremost. And so they can't just ignore what high crime or misdemeanor is any more than a court could ignore any aspect of the law that they're examining. Yeah, like if there was some evidence that Thomas was engaged in graft or bribery, that would be a high crime or misdemeanor. And I would support his impeachment and removal. I just haven't been shown that evidence that I would think that that's happened. It's been like, okay, he's taken planes, he's accepted gifts, he hasn't reported, disclosed the gifts. That to me is not enough to show bribery in the way that I think it has occurred with Trump. And we can get to the same outcome of like unstacking the court through another political process called lawmaking. Instead of going through impeachment, remember this requires 2/3 of Congress, of the Senate, to convict. Instead of doing this and like a rally around Alito, just pass a law that does what you need. Nuke the filibuster. Not only is it like more constitutionally justified, it's easier. Not true, Pisco. Hutch had a comment on the day when he conceded a remedy was legally sound, but then in doing so would destroy Democrats' legitimacy. Not so to what? I think that that sounds like he's saying that this would be very unpopular, and so Democrats would like lose support. That's what it sounds like based on how you're describing it. But maybe there's something else that I'm missing here. Right? He could say we shouldn't pass this legally sound thing because it'll poll bad. Right? So you need to explain why he's against the legally sound method. He could be against it because it violates some principle of constitutionalism. He can also be against it because it polls bad and would leave Democrats worse off. Both are potential reasons he could be against it. And I think in order for Hutch to be on board with something, he needs to think, unless exceptional circumstances apply, it is both legally sound, constitutionally, in keeping with his vision of liberalism, and also that it'll leave Democrats better off. It'll poll well, right? So I think both are necessary for him to support a thing. But maybe there's more context that I'm missing. Do you honestly believe if Dems recapture all three branches, they will do something about the Supreme Court instead of citing norms moving on? I'm not sure. I know which way I want to push, but yeah. Okay. You're correct, but there's no reason to believe that would be the case. Well, I'm just saying that maybe there is no reason to believe that would be the case, but that's just what Hutch thinks. In which case you could just be like, oh, it would poll well because X, Y, and Z. I just think we got to be careful why he's against certain things. He's against the political offenses and charging people without due process or something like that, right? He's against that stuff, both because he thinks it'll be ineffective politically, and he thinks it's contrary to constitutionalism. For two independent reasons. It's overdetermined, right? And he's against maybe the thing that you propose because maybe he thinks it's sound and in keeping with the constitutional structure, but he thinks that it will undermine Democrats, So I think those are self-standing reasons, right? That's, speak for themselves in some ways. Okay, let's talk real quick over here since I'm already on the page. I don't think that Trump is the president of the United States. And I know that is that is, I don't know how that'll be received. I'm just going to say it. Trump's not the president, in my opinion, legally, constitutionally. I think that Trump is occupying the office and duties of the president under color of law. But in my opinion, Trump is not the president. And it is because of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that I think this. And it is, I think, consistent with the Anderson decision that we're looking at right now to say it. Now, I'm not saying that I think that the Supreme Court necessarily would agree. This is just my reading of what the Constitution demands and what it says, and ultimately what it means. The reason is the same as the reason I thought he should have been disqualified in the Section 3 litigation in Colorado, among other states where it occurred, in that Trump engaged in insurrection, and that disqualifies him under Section 3. Now, the problem in the Colorado case, according to the court, was that states are not allowed to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That is not the same as saying that Section 3 does not operate to disqualify Trump. Merely that there are particular entities that themselves can't enforce Section 3. Understand the difference there, right? We have Section 3, that provides a qualification for office, to hold office in the United States. Now, you could say something like Section 3 does not disqualify Trump. Or you could say something like states can't enforce the disqualification. And these are fundamentally different things. To say that Section 3 does not, in fact, disqualify Trump is to say that under the terms of Section 3, he has not engaged in insurrection, or his position is one that isn't considered an officer of the United States, or maybe not even an office under the United States, right? We have those old arguments. Whereas to say that a particular entity, call it the states, can't enforce the disqualification imposed by Section 3 is merely to say that they don't have the right to, right? It would be like saying, let's take an example. Hutch, right? Now, Hutch can't enforce Section 3. Imagine if Hutch declared, he said, I declare Trump to be disqualified under Section 3. Imagine if I were to say it. If I were to say it, you would just say, well, Pisco can't enforce Section 3. He can say it all he wants. It doesn't mean that that is the case. Hutch can say that Trump is disqualified all he wants. Doesn't mean it's the case. Doesn't mean that he actually is disqualified, or that Hutch himself can effectuate the disqualification imposed by Section 3. Now, what did the court decide in Anderson? The Anderson decision, first of all, decided that states certainly, and this is an incorrect opinion. I mean, it's just so obviously wrong. In my opinion, that's me. Who am I? I'm just a, humble individual. But I think they got it wrong. But they did decide, and it's the holding of the Supreme Court, that states cannot decide whether or not you're disqualified under Section 3. They did not state that Trump himself is not captured by the disqualification of Section 3. And look at the words here. Proposed by Congress in 1866 and ratified by the states in 1868, the 14th Amendment expanded federal power at the expense of state autonomy, and thus fundamentally altered the balance of state and federal power struck by the Constitution. Section 1 of the amendment, for instance, bars the states from depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process or law, or denying to any person equal protection of the law. And this is what we call part of the 14th Amendment that is, quote, self-executing, right? Self-executing. we also have this Section 5, which gives Congress the power to enforce those prohibitions, right? In other words, those are prohibitions. The prohibitions come from the constitutional text. That is to say, Congress has the power to enforce it, but the text has force of its own, right? The prohibition exists if you're a formalist, right? They passed this amendment and they created the prohibition. And the prohibition exists independent of Congress's decision to enforce it or not. Does that make sense? And just look at how the Supreme Court phrases this. Section 5 confers on Congress the power to enforce those prohibitions, along with the other provisions of the amendment, by appropriate legislation. Keep reading. Section 3 of the amendment likewise restricts state autonomy, but through different means. It was designed to help ensure an enduring union by preventing former Confederates from returning to power in the aftermath of the Civil War. See these sessions from Congress, statement from Representative Stevens warning that without appropriate constitutional reforms, yelling secessionists and hissing copperheads would take seats in the House. Statement of Senator Howard lamenting the prospect of a state legislature made up entirely of disloyal elements, absent a disqualification provision. Section 3 aimed to prevent such a resurgence by barring from office those who, having once taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, afterwards went into rebellion against the government of the United States. Section 3 works by imposing on certain individuals a preventative and severe penalty, disqualification from holding a wide array of offices, rather than by granting rights to all. It is therefore necessary, as Chief Justice Chase concluded, and the Colorado Supreme Court itself recognized, to ascertain what particular individuals are embraced. Chase went on to explain that to accomplish this ascertainment and ensure effective results, proceedings, evidence, decisions, and enforcements of decisions more or less formal are indispensable. So look at the language. The question that needs further clarification is the ascertainment of something that already exists, namely the disqualification. We need a body to ascertain the existence or non-existence of something that the Section 3 imposes, namely disqualification. These bodies aren't just creating the disqualification out of nowhere. The disqualification is imposed by Section 3. What is the body doing? The body, Congress, again, I think wrongfully, to think that Congress is the only one who can enforce this provision, but that's the ruling, right? But Congress is going to decide either directly or through a mechanism that it establishes whether or not the imposition of a disqualification applies by the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It's not creating the disqualification, it's enforcing a prohibition that was enacted by the people of the United States in 1868. For its part, the Colorado Supreme Court also claimed there must be some kind of determination that Section 3 applies to a particular meaning before the disqualification holds meaning. In other words, right, the disqualification itself is imposed by the constitutional text. In order to understand to whom it applies, we need some body to enforce it. We need some enforcement mechanism. That much is obvious. But what is clear, right, is that the text of Section 3 itself, right, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, having done whatever. The text is not saying Congress shall have the ability to choose to put this disqualification or not. This disqualification is not a grant of legislative authority. Section 5 is, right? Section 5 grants legislative authority. But this just is. It imposes it. Now, as a necessary consequence of the Supreme Court's ruling here, we need Congress to enforce it. But Congress they can effectively choose not to enforce it by just failing to have any enforcement mechanism. but they can't directly say Section 3 doesn't exist. That's what's so, I think, what people don't understand is like this prohibition exists. It would be like saying, let's say there's a statute. There's a statute that says it's illegal to smoke marijuana. Now, as a matter of course, let's suppose that the executive chooses not to enforce the prohibition against marijuana. You can say that, well, there's no one here to enforce it, and so, it's effectively legal. What you can't say is that the person who smoked that marijuana when he knew that it wasn't being enforced by the executive didn't commit a crime under the law. In other words, the lack of enforcement doesn't equal the non-existence, from a formalistic perspective, of the disability, crime, you name it, right? And this is something that would be obvious in any other of the qualifications. If, when the Constitution says, for example, you have to be 35 to be a president, suppose that that's not enforced. Just no one wants to enforce it. Or we want to let Cenk Uygur, who was born outside of the United States and wasn't a natural born citizen, we want to let him be president, and just no one thinks to bring a case, or no one wants to bring a case, or for whatever reason, every state and Congress says courts shall be without jurisdiction to hear these claims, right? And assume that the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, never ruled on it or said that it's, we can't decide whether or not we have jurisdiction. That's up to the Congress. Well, no one would say, therefore, these disqualified candidates, that those disqualifications didn't exist. They're just not being enforced. The key principle, lack of enforcement doesn't equal lack of existence of the disability, of the disqualification, of the crime, of whatever the legal thing is. Now, functionally, that's the case, right? Functionally, it's the case. And that's why we say they edited out Section 3, because functionally, we understand that Congress is not in a legislative making mood, and certainly not one controlled by Republicans. But the existence of a functional state of affairs in any other context wouldn't be thought of as eliminating the principle. Look no further than the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, if we understand it as properly understood by the court in the Heller decision, it was ignored for most of the history of the United States. That doesn't mean that it didn't exist. That doesn't mean that it didn't exist. Same thing with the interpretation of the Judiciary Act in the Casa decision. Same thing, by the way, if you accept the legal argument of the insane anti-birthright citizenship people, on their vision of what birthright citizenship is meant to provide and to whom, the Constitution hasn't been in force for this amount of time. That doesn't mean that the legal right, entitlement, disability, disqualification, exception, crime, whatever you want to call the thing, right? The denominator, the X factor, right? That thing doesn't exist from a legal perspective. Different things. I want to show you more. The Constitution empowers Congress to prescribe how those determinations should be made. How? Not if. How, not if. Now, you can get a functional if by just not describing how. But you can't decide formalistically to say, we're turning off Section 3. The relevant provision is Section 5, which enables Congress, subject, of course, to judicial review, to pass appropriate legislation to enforce the 14th Amendment. Or as Senator Howard puts it at the time the amendment was framed, Section 5 casts upon Congress the responsibility of seeing to it for the future that all the sections of the amendment are carried out in good faith. Congress's Section 5 power is critical when it comes to Section 3. Indeed, during a debate on enforcement legislation less than a year after ratification, this is important, Senator Trumbull noted that notwithstanding Section 3, hundreds of men were holding office in violation of its terms. The Supreme Court of the United States is citing positively a statement from Senator Trumbull during the debates after ratification, noting that people are in violation of the provision. Trumbull continues, provided no means of enforcing, that is the Constitution, the disqualification, necessitating a bill to give effect to the fundamental law embraced in the Constitution. It's beautiful. It's exactly what I'm saying, right? The fundamental law is as I've described. These people holding office are in violation of the law. That's before it's enforced, right? That's what Trumbull is complaining about. That's what the Supreme Court is citing favorably. This is to justify their bizarre, I think, untenable solution or contention that Congress is the only one to enforce Section 3. But fine, accept that ludicrous decision. All Congress is doing is giving effect to the fundamental law embraced by the Constitution. And so I, like Senator Trumbull in the post-ratification era, am noticing. I'm looking upon the country and I say, men are holding office in violation of the terms of Section 3. No different than Trumbull is. Trumbull and I were boys in this respect. Again, cited favorably in the Anderson decision. I look upon my country and I weep. And I weep because there are men who are holding office in violation of the terms of Section 3. It's not that the lack of enforcement means that he's not in violation, right? That would contradict Trumbull's statement, cited favorably by the Supreme Court. He's in violation. Trump currently is in violation of the law by purporting to occupy the office of president. That's why I say quote unquote president. He's illegitimate. Just as the hundreds of men holding office after the ratification of Section 3 are illegitimate in their office. That's why I say Trump is not the president, because he's not. Quo warranto. By what right? By what right does Trump claim office? Now, effectively, being that there's no enforcement mechanism, this pretender, this usurper, is allowed to occupy the office and powers of the presidency. But I don't consider him a legitimate president. I don't really think he's a president. What is there to be done? Well, Congress should enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, as Trumbull wanted them to. So this is not some little thing that we should ignore. And yes, I want this to be enforced. What does enforcement mean? It means Congress needs to, as soon as Democrats take power, immediately pass legislation to provide for quo warranto and other actions to remove the current individuals who are in violation of Section 3. Anyone who's currently occupying office. That's one thing that we can do to enforce Section 3. These people are in violation of the terms, and to the extent that they're continuing to hold office, Congress must enforce this. Congress must remove them from office. their purported claim to office. Quo warranto, by what right? You know something else to enforce Section 3? What I would do. Declare as null and void any official action by congressional legislation, any official action taken by someone who at the time of their action did not lawfully hold office because of a Section 3 disqualification. I would apply that to every single thing that Trump has done, including presidential medals of freedom, including stupid little ceremonial things, including pardons. I know that this has a low likelihood of success with the current Supreme Court. I'm not doubtful about that. I'm just saying this is what I propose as a way to try to get effectuated the end of these stupid and corrupt pardons. And I think that increasing the number of judges on the Supreme Court is a way to best calibrate our odds on that. Again, I'm not trying to give you the hopium to say this is likely to occur. I think it's unlikely to occur unless Democrats are willing and able to do the justified action to increase the number of Supreme Court justices. But I do think it is the correct thing to happen. I do think not only is it consistent with the law, so it's not violating the law, it is keeping faith with the law. It is upholding the Constitution in the best possible way. Congress was charged to enforce this provision of law. Congress ought to charge and enforce this provision of law. It's not necessarily criminal actions. It is a disability. It's a disqualification that might have other impacts. But Congress has been derelict in its refusal to enforce this provision. And by what right does Trump issue a pardon to every Jan 6er? By what right? By no right. Yeah, order of operations 1, expand the court. Kill the filibuster, expand the court. Number 2, pass implementing legislation for Section 3 and give particular remedies and the right to sue for certain actors. Directly enforce Section 3 as against by a statutory provision. Congress should directly enforce it. In addition to making a mechanism, they should just directly apply it to Trump. And one of the remedies to a violation of Section 3 should not just be disqualification, disability from office, but also rendering null and void any previous official action taken under color of law. How is something like this different from the East? It's because I think that that's actually what the Constitution allows for. And I believe it's not inconsistent with the Constitution. And if you believe it's inconsistent with the Constitution, you would raise an argument to that effect. Unironically, you should, maybe I'll write something about it. Yeah. Now, what people will point to is this de facto officer doctrine, but it's not clear to me that this is something that the Supreme Court has dealt with before. And there's this case Ryder. We're not going to read it today because I'm just kind of like over that right now. But this is like the last word on the de facto officer doctrine, and it's like it's not a very, I think, coherent case law, and it applies in some weird cases and doesn't apply in some other cases. So like maybe I'll do a better analysis of this. But remember, this is just a judicial doctrine. And one of the things we're guarding against here, and why I think it's important not to apply the de facto officer doctrine, is because it's not like we are fighting the official actions of Trump, though that's a political reason we're doing it, just based on their disposition. Though again, that's a political reason we're doing it. We're fighting the actions because of the structural affront to the Constitution. In other words, just like the appointments clause must be upheld, and there are remedies like dismissing the case against Comey if the appointments clause is not followed, And you might think, well, hang on a second. Why does the indictment have to go just because she wasn't lawfully appointed? Well, the reason is, if we just let the indictment go through, we're just like saying that these appointment clauses are like, they don't really have anything other than like a signaling effect. But these aren't recommendations, right? The Constitution is not a recommendation. It is a commandment, unless it is literally just like a allowance, right? But to the extent that the Constitution's terms are mandatory, it's not a recommendation. And so, okay, apply the de facto officer doctrine when, someone they're not really attacking the structure from a structural perspective, the nature of the office. They're more like worried about the particulars of their case, and it's something that they didn't like raise in the first instance. It's kind of like a collateral attack or something. Maybe then you can raise it or something. But when it deals with like key core questions of constitutional competency, I don't think it should be invoked to ignore part of the Constitution. This sounds like sovereign citizen. What about this sounds like sovereign citizen? Can you explain that? Yeah, what about this is a simple reading of the Constitution? Yeah, help me out. Like, it's very easy to say, oh, this is silly. But I would like to hear an argument, right? When I made these arguments to Hutch last week and today, I point out that SCOTUS should tread carefully as not to deprive aid or comfort. No, I don't think that would count as aid or comfort. Oh, when you say simple, you just mean straightforward, or do you mean like incorrect? I might be misreading you. I think these are all like principles that are just proclaiming he isn't your president. That means Congress is derelict and treasonous. Oh, I don't think that Congress is derelict and treasonous just by virtue of that he isn't the president. I didn't say that. I think Congress is derelict by derelict, I just mean they're not following their duty in enforcing Section 3. But I don't think that means that Congress is quote unquote treasonous. I challenge you to find when I said that. Congress is derelict. They definitely are derelict. They haven't done what they're supposed to do. That's all I mean by derelict. Actually, we're gonna do this one by one. Straight shot. Do you agree that Congress is derelict by not enforcing Section 3? And then we'll get to treasonous, which I didn't say. I also never said that me just proclaiming it makes it so that Congress is derelict. It's their lack of enforcement that makes them derelict, not my proclamation. Now that I think about it, doesn't Eastman say that none of this justice would go for it, but doesn't Pisco also say SCOTUS wouldn't go for it? I mean, that's just one indication that like might indicate, that's like part of the rationale that one might say, like one might think that they think it's illegal is because none of them would go for it. I know none of them will go for it, therefore I think it's illegal. But you could say, I think it's legal, but I don't think they'll bite at it. I mean, none of that is inconsistent. Every single justice ruled that states can't enforce Section 3, but me and other people, other individuals think that was wrongly decided, and we're not like crazy for thinking that. And there are other really, really preeminent constitutional scholars who think that, including Akhil Amar and others, who think the court got it wrong on a 9-0 decision on states. So yeah, you weren't saying simple in a negative way. Got it. So yeah, I think the 9-0 Eastman thing is like one piece of evidence that might lead someone to think that what they're doing is illegal. But if he genuinely thought it was legal, that would be different. I don't think that he genuinely thought it was legal. I think he knew that when it was like, I think he mentioned something about violating the Electoral Count Act. So that's just like one piece of evidence in addition to the sheer lack of good faith that it would take to read the Electoral Count Act or the 12th Amendment as granting the vice president unilateral discretion to decide who won an election. So there's a lot of different things that point to Eastman's theory being bad. And I think that none of them are here, except for my intuition that Supreme Court would probably disagree just because it's stacked with conservatives. I also didn't claim that if Trump is in fact not elected and assume the role of president illegal, then treason is on the table. You just don't know what treason is. Yeah, I mean, it's just clear to me that you don't know the words of what you're saying. You just have a very uncalibrated view of like what treason is, and so you just say treason whenever it's like a bad thing or against the Constitution. Just because it's against the Constitution is treason. Or that I think that. Then treason is on the table. I don't even know what you're talking about. Charging Congress with treason? No. And no, Trump, in fact, was elected. He just can't assume office. Trump was elected. He just is disqualified from office. Any more than you could like elect a chair, right? The Electoral College should just come in and say, we elect this chair for president or a dead person, right? But it's not clear to me that well, actually, I'm just going to say it. A chair is not allowed to be president. A dead person cannot be president. Sounds like, yeah, in virtue of what, Straight Shot? I mean, you've already dodged the treason thing, right? You don't know what treason is? Why does it sound like sovereign citizen stuff? Sovereign citizen people are like citing Article 4 of the Articles of Confederation. And they're like, I'm an Article 3 free inhabitant, and they're citing like bullshit law. It doesn't make any sense. But I'm saying words that you can respond to. Just sounds like you have no argument. Sounds pretty low IQ. Is it fair to say that if Trump can be shown to be treasonous, and that a reasonable and educated person would see that clearly, and Congress has enabled his treason, are the traitors for proxy? No. Treason is a specific crime. And just because you support someone who committed treason doesn't mean that you committed treason. It's treason because, in fact, Trump would have, in fact, broken his previous oaths. Breaking an oath isn't treason, dipshit. Oh my God. I don't know where people get all of this like confidence just to say random shit. Just be clear, you have no idea what treason is, and you're saying random things. And you're saying that I'm a sovereign citizen. Treason is the crime, is I think the only crime that's defined in the Constitution. This guy thinks breaking oath equals treason. Breaking oath. So when Bill Clinton lied under oath, he was committing treason. Only that's fucking stupid. I bet it's scrambling right now. Google, what is treason? I'll just preempt this. Treason in the U.S. sense is called levying war. Crime is levying war or giving aid or comfort to the enemies. Trump committed treason by inciting insurrection, which is a form of levying war against the United States. Just because a congressperson, after he's levied war, like publicly supports that person, doesn't mean that they are also levying war as understood in the legal test. Levying war is a term of art which is coextensive with insurrection. This is 2 aspects out of 6 of the Old English rule for treason. The Americans only decided to take 2 of the ways to commit treason, and that was levying war and giving aid or comfort to the enemies. This is for foreign adversaries, for foreign enemies. Levying war is like the domestic focus one. So, for example, giving aid and comfort to the Soviet Unions, like nuclear secrets to the Soviet Unions, handing over, right? There, it's not like you're doing insurrection by handing over the nuclear secrets, but you're giving aid or comfort to the enemies of the United States in the context of the war with Germany. If you were feeding information over to the Nazis, giving aid or comfort. In treason, no. Yeah, sorry. Your wicked Filbert memes aren't landing on me. Where's this dude? Where's this dude? Straight shot. What you gotta say? Anyway, that's my thought process. I think it's all based in the Constitution. I think it's all consistent with Anderson. Trump is treasonous and his close allies. Congress is seditious. No. First of all, stop interchanging words. Very low IQ. Very low. Sedition does not equal treason. Don't be low IQ. Stop, don't change words. Sedition ain't treason. His close allies, by virtue of being a close ally, doesn't mean that you're treasonous as well. In order to commit treason, you need to do treason. If you don't do treason, that in virtue of being a close ally doesn't make you treasonous. You're gonna drop this whole theory on online, yeah? Just explain it to them, dude. I don't know what to say. Like, sometimes there needs to be like for certain people, I feel like there needs to be just like a reset. Like, stop. You shouldn't be in the mood of like declaring things. Ask questions. If you don't know, don't just say things you don't know. We don't even have a crime called sedition in this country anymore. We call it seditious conspiracy. But seditious conspiracy is distinctly and notably carved out of levying war. It's literally directly not treason, even though it feels like it. And that's because insurrections require completed acts. Completed acts of insurrection, not just conspiracies to commit insurrection. And just being friends with a treasonous person doesn't make you treasonous. Even cooperating towards some political goal at some point in time. So that's not my position. I don't think you should charge Marco Rubio with treason. I don't think he's committed treason. I don't think that you should charge him with seditious conspiracy. I don't think he's done that. So, yeah. Seems like you're just totally lost, my friend. Anyway, I think that's everything I got for y'all today. I'm going to be back tomorrow. Can a lack of action be treason? This, I don't think so. Let me think. There is some potential case law for this. Or, sorry, historical cases for this. Though it was never charged, as I understand it. And these were some of the generals who let the forts open for the Confederates in the lead up to the Civil War. They were considered traitors by that generation. They were accused of having committed treason. But there's like a specific duty of care of like the generals. So I actually think that it's possible, it's cognizable based on the historical example in when this was like written, that they considered this guy who let the forts open, right? I forget the general's name. Akil Omar wrote a brief about it, actually. You know what? I'm just going to make sure we get his name. I heard. Congrats. I also heard that it was kind of like a stats game thing at the end there. Section 3 brief. This was actually a really sick brief. I liked it a lot. You've convinced me. I'm going to show you. That question inspired me. It was a good question. This was Akil Amar's brief in the Anderson decision. He's an originalist. At the heart of this case, perhaps one of the most important cases in American history, is the oath. Specifically, the oath of constitutional fidelity heightened by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Each of your honors has taken such an oath publicly and solemnly. It is an oath to follow the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. It is not an oath to vindicate some vague and free-floating theory of democracy. In any event, democracy on both sides of this case. And he goes through some of the history. This is the part. Underlying Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, there resides a similar key episode, an episode known virtually to all Americans in the 1860s, and alas, forgotten by most Americans today, even the learned. The episode has gone almost unmentioned in all previous scholarship on Section 3, and in previous briefing in the case, we believe that this episode is a key that can unlock many of the issues. In part 1 of what follows, we briefly tell the story of the first insurrection of the 1860s. The insurrection before the second insurrection of the 1860s, typically known today as the Civil War. In that first insurrection, high-level executive officials in Washington, D.C. violated their solemn constitutional oaths as part of a concerted plan not just to hand over southern forts to rebels, but also to prevent the lawful inauguration of the duly elected Abraham Lincoln. The parallels between this insurrection in late December 1860 and January 1861 and the more recent Trump-fueled insurrection are deeply and decisively relevant to today's case. All right, let's get to that first insurrection. Of course, the precise actions, inactions, intentions, and mens rea of Trump needs to be properly evaluated before he's deemed ineligible. And they advocate for a 50-state solution. That's also what I think is demanded. So this is the first insurrection. Almost every American school child today knows the name Benedict Arnold, but how many have heard of John B. Floyd? Everyone knew his name in the 1860s. Loyal Unionists labeled him as the new Benedict Arnold, and many did so entirely in reference to his actions in the first insurrection of the 1860s. Let me just get this. Prior to Lincoln's inauguration, like Arnold, Floyd held the keys to America's national security and then tried to hand those keys to the enemy. Floyd, as an unapologetic Virginia slaveholder, served as President James Buchanan's Secretary of War from 1857 to December 29, 1860, when he resigned in protest after Buchanan declined to abandon Fort Sumter. Most crucially for today's case, in the weeks after Lincoln's election, Floyd used the great powers of his office through a devious combination of affirmative acts and strategic failures to act to try to thwart a proper transition of power. One bright thread of this storyline involved Southern forts, a thread that would eventually become the fuse of April 1861 in Charleston Harbor. That's Fort Sumter. South Carolina purported to secede on December, again, important word choice here, on December 20th. A week later, rebels seized Fort Moultrie and Castle Pinckney in Charleston Harbor and raised the palmetto flag over these federal outposts. That's the South Carolina flag. In the days that followed, rebels captured many other strategically positioned fortresses, including Forts Morgan and Gaines, guarding the mouth of Mobile Bay, these other forts, whatever. By early February, the only major installation in the lower South over which the Union flag still flew were Charleston's own Fort Sumters, etc., etc. On February 7th, 1861, Representative Henry Winter Davis of Maryland exclaimed, "Even cabinet ministers have violated their oaths by organizing insurrection." Looking back on the 1860-61 interregnum, ex-President Ulysses S. Grant in his famous memoirs denounced Floyd for having scattered the army so that much of it could be captured when hostilities should commence, and distributed the cannon and small arms from northern arsenals throughout the South so as to be on hand when treason wanted them. A furtive insurrectionist in late 1860s, Floyd soon became an avowed one in mid-1861 as a Confederate brigadier general openly warned against the very Constitution that he had sworn a solemn oath to support, as head of the War Department, no less. That is, he was the head of the U.S. Union War Department. In early 1862, Grant met Floyd on the battlefield almost face to face. Floyd commanded Tennessee's Fort Donelson, which fell to Grant in mid-February. This Union triumph, its first decisive victory of the Civil War, began Grant's rise to glory. He then became president. In telling the story of Fort Donelson, Grant, echoing Henry Winter Davis, that representative who was talking about insurrectionists, emphasized that Floyd was not merely an insurrectionist, but also an oathbreaker, the precise toxic combination at the bullseye of Section 3. When Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was being drafted and proposed in the mid-1860s, Grant had warmly supported this amendment, as Salmon P. Chase had not. And Chase, by the way, is the person who is the Supreme Court justice who did the case which the Supreme Court in the United States cited as the most important one. This, I forgot the name of it now. Where's Salmon Chase? Chase, right? In Griffin's case. So Griffin was against the amendment, right? Griffin was against the amendment. And that's what Akil Amar is noting. Don't listen to Chase sitting in circuit. Don't listen to him. In his memoirs, Grant acidly commented that Floyd was unfitted for command for the reason that his conscience must have troubled him and made him afraid. As Secretary of War, he had taken a solemn oath to maintain the Constitution of the United States and to uphold the same against all its enemies. He had betrayed that trust. The insurrectionary betrayals perpetrated by Floyd and other top officials in the lame duck Buchanan administration went far beyond the abandonment of Southern forts. They also involved, through both actions and inactions of Floyd and his allies, efforts to prevent President-elect Lincoln from lawfully assuming power at its inauguration. Even before the inauguration, alarms rang out in Congress about the first insurrection already underway. On February 1st, 1861, this representative declared on the House floor that preparations were actually threatening to take possession of the Capitol. And so he goes through all this. But anyway, it's all to say, I think that there is a cognizable inaction prompt here, that you could do inaction if you have a duty, right? If you have an affirmative duty, as perhaps Secretary of War would have, to prevent this, and you just decide not to do anything. And that's why I think another theory of liability for Trump is also his decision not to call forth the National Guard on January 6th. That wasn't actually pushed during the Colorado case. They were relying more on incitement there, but I think that there's something there. And I think that if you look at the history, that assuming you have a duty, that intentional inaction for the purpose of insurrection is itself insurrection. But anyway, good question. Great question. Who was this? Who the fuck was this? Fresh paycheck. Good shit. All right, folks. We'll see you, I guess, technically today. We'll see you technically today. But I love you all very much. You're the best. Stay cool. Colloquially, yes. Technically, no.